Chapter 2273. Translator, Atlas Studios Editor. Atlas Studios' Guan Yun was overwhelmed by fear. He knew that he was going to lose miserably this time. No, this was something he couldn't accept. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. Her Highness the Princess was watching from below. Moreover, her gaze had been fixed on that brat. Only by defeating him completely could the princess know who was the real strong one, and who was worthy of the princess's favor. Guan Yun's eyes were vicious as he launched a fierce attack. In an instant, the defense line formed by the god-class mounts seemed to be in danger. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth slightly curled up as he silently said, "Thousand Beasts Feast." Yes, Yi Xian had activated the Thousand Beasts Feast. In an instant, all the god-class mounts were boosted in strength. Guan Yun couldn't do anything to them. However, this was only the beginning. Yi Xian was already on his way. Countless seals and talismans floated around Yi Xian. With every step Yi Xian took, not only Guan Yun, but everyone watching Yi Xian felt their hearts tremble. How were they going to fight? At the start, everyone thought that Guan Yun was an upper-level true immortal, while Yi Xian was only an intermediate-level true immortal. This was a battle where the outcome was certain. However, when the battle started, they realized how ridiculous it was to judge Yi Xian's strength based on his cultivation level. Seal Grandmaster. Talisman Grandmaster. What was this? This was simply bullying. Under everyone's watchful eyes. With a wave of his hand, Yi Xian sent countless seals and talismans flying toward Guan Yun. Lightning, thunder, fire dragons, meteorites, divine swords, Dharma, and so on. All sorts of attacking methods were displayed on the arena. How was this a battle? This was simply bullying. From the start, Guan Yun didn't even have the right to stand beside Yi Xian. He had already lost the battle. This was even more terrifying than Yi Xian's previous words that caused his opponent to lose. Many people were even praying that they wouldn't encounter Yi Xian. Even if they did, they prayed that Yi Xian wouldn't use seals and talismans to deal with him. They would rather be defeated by Yi Xian with a single sentence than be attacked round after round like Guan Yun. Yi Xian had just created close to 100 seals and talismans. He was going to use up all of them. According to the rules, the battle could continue unless one side was either Yi Xian or had lost all ability to move. In other words, although everyone understood that Guan Yun had already lost and had completely lost, Guan Yun didn't admit defeat. Furthermore, he hadn't lost his ability to move, so Yi Xian had the right to attack. Suddenly, Yi Xian raised his head and all the attacks stopped in an instant. How boring. You actually dare to fight on the stage with such strength? Yes, that was what Yi Xian said. That was Guan Yun, but in Yi Xian's eyes, he was so unbearable. When Yi Xian walked out, the crowd automatically opened up a path for him. No one dared to block Yi Xian's path because Yi Xian's terrifying performance was too much for them to bear. They didn't even dare to look Yi Xian in the eye. Restriction Grandmaster, Divine Talisman Grandmaster, and Super Genius. These three identities made Yi Xian an existence that people could only look up to. No matter what they thought of Yi Xian, at this moment, they all looked at Yi Xian strangely. Those who were hostile to Yi Xian at the beginning finally realized that Yi Xian wasn't someone they could provoke. However, this gave rise to endless jealousy. For many people, it would be extremely difficult for them to become one of Yi Xian's three identities in their entire lives. However, Yi Xian had monopolized all three titles by himself. How could they not be jealous? Restriction Grandmasters and Divine Talisman Grandmasters took in very few disciples. Moreover, the requirements for aptitude were very high. QWPM. These two professions could be said to be very resource-intensive professions. Of course, there wasn't a single sub-profession that didn't need to be accumulated with resources. Even in a short period of time, the clan only supported a few Restriction and Rune Grandmasters. To nurture a Restriction or Rune Grandmaster, not only did they need to find an extremely talented disciple, but they also needed to spend a large amount of resources to nurture them. As for cultivating Restriction and Divine Talisman at the same time, it wasn't impossible, but it was almost impossible to succeed. But Yi Xian did it. Yi Xian did what they only dared to think but not do. You know how to refine restrictions and divine talismans? When Yi Xian walked to Fian and the others, the princess was also there. The princess was also present. Her gaze towards Yi Xian was filled with astonishment and surprise. Although she was a princess, she had never seen someone with such high talent. It was as if she finally understood why her sister, Lord Goddess Mi Yan, was so concerned about Yi Xian. Once such a talent matured, it was simply unimaginable. However, she was actually overthinking it. Mi Yan didn't know that Yi Xian knew these things. What's so strange about this? Yi Xian said indifferently. In Yi Xian's mind, as long as the system was there, no matter what he did, it was natural. Therefore, he didn't care at all. He was speaking from the bottom of his heart. In Yi Xian's mind, becoming a restriction and divine talisman grandmaster really didn't take much effort. However, Yi Xian's words made everyone speechless. What did he mean by what was so strange about this? This was very strange in the first place. There was almost no suspense in Yi Xian's following battles. In fact, most of his opponents chose to admit defeat. This was because they knew that even a peak true god shouldn't try to challenge a super existence who had the dual support of a restriction and divine talisman grandmaster. Even if they admitted defeat in a battle against Yi Xian, there was nothing to be ashamed of. How could ordinary people be on the same stage as monstrous geniuses? The selection requirement of the Kunlun realm was that only peak true gods could appear. Once one became an over-god, the Kunlun realm wouldn't accept them. Of course, after becoming an over-god, one would be a powerful figure with a certain level of strength in the Kunlun realm. It was impossible for them to participate in such a selection. Although the difference between the over-god realm and the true god realm was only one major realm, it was the first major breakthrough in the cultivation system of the god realm. Many people cultivated from the true god realm to the peak true god realm in one go, displaying incomparable talent. However, even the over-god realm couldn't be crossed. If one wanted to break through to the over-god realm, it was no longer possible to just rely on talent. If one wanted to break through to the over-god realm, it required a lot of coincidences and great luck. It could be said that among 100 cultivators, there were at least 10 who could reach the peak true god realm under the premise that they didn't die. Chapter 2274. However, even if 100 peak true gods were given sufficient resources and an excellent cultivation environment, perhaps only one of them could become an over-god. Gogox, the difference of one step was huge. The over-god realm was a realm that countless people dreamt of, but it was something they could only dream of. This was also the reason why so many people were attracted to the Kunlun realm when it started to recruit disciples. There were even some disciples from aristocratic families who were stuck at the Kunlun realm and joined sections. They fought desperately to join the Kunlun realm. Among them were the 10 great geniuses of the Kunlun realm, the 4 great spiritual children, and disciples from various aristocratic families. These people were seen as the ones who had the highest chance of becoming one of the 100 people. As the battle progressed, Yi Xian's opponents became stronger and stronger. However, most people would choose to avoid Yi Xian as long as they had the chance. This was because every battle was decided by one round. The selection would not give you a second chance. No matter what the reason was, once you lost once, it was equivalent to saying that you would not be qualified in the future. Therefore, the person that most people did not want to face the most was not the disciples of aristocratic families or the geniuses, but Yi Xian. Yi Xian's left hand was a seal, and his right hand was a divine talisman. He left a deep impression on people. Of course, there were some exceptions. By now, Yi Xian had entered the final stages of the selection. His opponents were constantly getting stronger, and they were basically all upper-level true gods. Yi Xian's strength had also been unlocked once more, and he was now a mid-level grade 7 true god. However, even though he was a mid-level grade 7 true god, Yi Xian was the one with the lowest cultivation level among those who remained. This time, Yi Xian was facing a super existence again. This was because this person was a person who had been famous for a long time. Hello, Yi Xian. I am Kuan Buyu from the Kuan Nan family. I never thought that I would have the chance to fight with you. I hope that we can unleash our greatest strength in this battle. In front of Yi Xian was a youth with a sunny smile. At least, his first impression of Yi Xian was quite good. Don't worry, I won't go easy on him. Yi Xian replied with a smile. Haha, that's good. However, I have to remind you in advance that I am also a restriction grandmaster. Moreover, before I participated in the battle, my family gave me a lot of special magic treasures. Therefore, when the battle starts later, I will have an advantage. This fellow was rather interesting. In this arena, who didn't use all the methods available to them. No matter what method they used, as long as they could stand on the arena, they would receive the full support of their respective families. Many people even brought along their family's treasures to fight. There was no need to explain this at all. Anyway, according to the rules, as long as it was not a super treasure that could destroy the world, it was allowed. And as long as it was a magic treasure that could be brought onto the stage, then it proved that it was approved and could be used. It doesn't matter where it came from. Since it's in your hands, it's yours. All right, then I have no choice but to use my restriction to deal with your restriction. Yi Xian had a smile on his face. For someone like Kuan Buyu, it was difficult for you to say that you were hostile towards him. Because of his magnanimity, he told you his trump card from the very beginning. Even if you knew that he was borrowing external forces, it wouldn't be good for you to get angry. Moreover, this was a battle that allowed external forces to be used in the first place. Yi Xian versus Kuan Buyu of the Kuan family. Battle begin. It was the voice of an elder of the sect. As the competition progressed, there were now elders involved in every match. They would observe the battle between two people in the arena. Once one of them was in danger, they would immediately step in to save the other party. After all, to be able to make it this far, which one of them wasn't of noble status and powerful strength? If they fell, it would be a heavy loss. Haha, Yi Xian, it's starting. Are you going to make the first move, or should I? This guy was a weirdo. He actually asked such a question. But it made sense. Most of the super geniuses from aristocratic families had been taught lessons and experienced environments since young. They would never imagine how difficult it was for someone like Yi Xian to fight his way up step by step. Please. Yi Xian didn't care about the advantage of making the first move. Hence, he casually gestured for Kuan Buyu to attack first. At this moment, outside the arena, the crowd had already started discussing again. Even Her Royal Highness didn't know what to do. This Kuan Buyu is one of the top 10 geniuses of the divine realm. It's said that his restriction ability is already at the level of a master. Furthermore, the Kuan family is famous for their illusionary mythical beasts. They can summon illusionary mythical beasts that don't even exist. They're extremely powerful. That's right. Apart from these two, Kuan Buyu also possesses a special ancient bloodline. Furthermore, the Kuan family spent a huge amount of resources to successfully awaken it. I heard that Kuan Buyu has 3 explosive forms, each more powerful than the last. Perhaps many people didn't understand what these people were talking about, but Her Royal Highness knew very well. It was said that Kuan Buyu's mother was from an ancient lost clan. Who would have thought that his mother's special bloodline would be inherited by Kuan Buyu? Originally, no one cared about the special bloodline's name, but now it was known as the Triple Divine Body. Under normal circumstances, there was nothing special about the Triple Divine Body. On the surface, it was just a slightly stronger physique. However, if the first seal was undone, then one's strength would multiply. Undoing the second seal would multiply 10 times. The third seal would multiply by 100 times. Such a powerful physique allowed Kuan Buyu to successfully rank in the top 3 of the top 10 geniuses. Furthermore, it was said that Kuan Buyu could already undo the second seal. As for the third seal, it was said that he had the ability to undo it as well. For a moment, Her Royal Highness actually began to worry about Yi Xian's safety. One had to know that 100 times strength was not something that Yi Xian could withstand. Go inform the sect and have them be prepared. Whether it's Kuan Buyu or Yi Xian, I don't want any of them to fall. Yes, Your Royal Highness. Her Royal Highness couldn't help but worry because unlocking Kuan Buyu's 3 outbursts had a price, and that was his mind. As his strength was unlocked, his mind would become more and more violent. When he undid the second seal, his mind would become numb, and most of what was left would be his battle instincts. When the third seal was completely undone, he might become a monster that only knew how to kill. This was something that couldn't be helped. However, Kuan Buyu was not a bad person. Therefore, although everyone knew that he would become extremely violent after his transformation, no one blamed him. Chapter 2275. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. However, if he were to kill Yi Xian today, the princess believed that his elder sister would definitely be furious. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD had been many years since the princess had seen his sister care so much about someone. During Yi Xian's participation in the selection, Meili had asked him about his progress 3 times. QWPM both of them were geniuses of the god domain. No matter which one of them it was, they couldn't be allowed to die. At this moment, Yi Xian signaled Kuan Buyu to attack first. Kuan Buyu didn't argue and directly said to Yi Xian, "All right. Pay attention. I'm going to attack." After saying that, a ray of light covered his body. Armor of light. This was one of the 3 great treasures of the Kuan Nan family. It was said that this treasure armor didn't have a physical body and was completely refined by light. It was a super treasure that could be used for both offense and defense. Moreover, it would be adjusted according to the strength of the wearer. Who would have thought that this thing would be in Kuan Buyu's possession? Of course, this treasure of the Kuan Nan family was passed down to their #1 genius. Who else would it be passed down to? Then, a pair of strange things appeared in Kuan Buyu's hands. This thing was a close combat weapon. However, Kuan Buyu's wasn't just for close combat. Double Stinger Massacre. Suddenly, Kuan Buyu's hand swiped. 2 rays of light attacked Yi Xian. However, the 2 rays of light turned into 2 shadow-like phantoms halfway and pounced on Yi Xian. Good heavens, to be able to turn into phantoms when attacking, this technique wasn't simple at all. Ding! System notification. Target is a 7th grade soldier grade upper true god. Ding! System notification. Host, please take note. Target has been detected to have a hidden strength. Ding! System notification. Host, please take note. Target has been detected to have a special ability. The system's 3 notifications rang out, letting Yi Xian know that this Kuan Buyu was the greatest opponent he'd ever faced. Yi Xian didn't hesitate and directly summoned the 1,000 Beast Sword Servants and the Blossom God Sword Servants. The Divine Beast army led by the 2 sword attendants could still be of some use. However, Yi Xian did not expect that Kuan Buyu also had the ability to summon God of Illusions, Will of Slaughter. Suddenly, Kuan Buyu put the 2 swords together and casually tossed them out. They rapidly turned into a void gate, and from that void gate, countless phantoms rushed out. Yi Xian frowned. What kind of transcendent artifact was this? There were clearly 2 of them, but they were summoning-type transcendent artifacts. This was something Yi Xian had never seen before. System detect that one. Ding! System notification. Insufficient data, unable to view. Alright, so be it if there was no way to detect it. Yi Xian was also helpless. Soon, Yi Xian's mythical beast army clashed with Kuan Buyu's phantom army. It could be said that the individual strength of Yi Xian's mythical beast legion was stronger than those illusions. However, the phantoms seemed to be endless. They were rushing out from the void gate non-stop. In an instant, they were actually fighting to a draw. White is not white, black is not black. The light in the shadows. Seal domain. What? A domain? It was actually a domain. A small semi-domain created by using seals. Although this could not be considered a complete domain, it was, after all, half a domain. Everyone was in an uproar. The strength that Kuan Buyu displayed now was already beyond their imagination. None of them had expected that Kuan Buyu actually had such a trick up his sleeve. A semi-domain. This was a semi-domain. Even many over-god realm powerhouses did not have a domain. However, Kuan Buyu, this true god realm guy, was able to unleash a semi-domain. In an instant, a gray light screen enveloped Yi Xian and Kuan Buyu. Ding! System notification. Host is affected by a domain. Defense reduced by half, attack power reduced by half, and divine telekinesis reduced by half. Ding! System notification. Kuan Buyu is affected by a domain. Defense increased, attack power increased, and divine telekinesis increased. What a powerful semi-domain. It could weaken the opponent and strengthen the user at the same time. Such a domain was really too useful. Yi Xian, pay attention. This is my greatest trump card. I'm going to attack. Kuan Buyu's voice rang out, reminding Yi Xian that he was about to attack. Come on, let me see how strong you are. Yi Xian lightly smiled. This fellow even reminded him before attacking. It could be said that Yi Xian was extremely satisfied with him. Of course, Yi Xian did not forget to find a way to crack the domain. System, is there any way to crack it? Ding! System notification. Host does not have enough resources. Unable to find a suitable method. There was no suitable method. Yi Xian's heart trembled slightly. Could it be that he was really going to lose this time? No, Yi Xian would not admit defeat so easily. He also believed that he would not lose so easily. If he had eternal points, Yi Xian would be able to use a domain, which was the eternal body. Yi Xian's eternal domain, but Yi Xian did not have any eternal points. Therefore he could only imagine. Although the 6-syllable Sanskrit mantra was very powerful, it was obviously impossible to use it. Perhaps all that was left was to devour the spiritual consciousness. If Yi Xian were to use the second ability of the spirit god Devour, the system would be converted into a success rate. In that case, Yi Xian would be able to devour the spiritual sense of the person in front of me. However, Yi Xian was unwilling to do so. In Yi Xian's heart, this guy was qualified enough to be Yi Xian's opponent. If he used his spiritual consciousness to devour Yi Xian's spiritual consciousness, that was not the result that Yi Xian wanted. It seemed that he could only use the summoning ability of the wings of the gods. Cloning of the gods. This was a skill that came with the wings of the gods. By consuming the divine wings energy, one could transform into a fallen god. Although Yi Xian would retain his original strength, he would only retain his form, not his soul. However, Yi Xian believed that since the system had given him such a skill, this skill could not be said to be completely useless. Yi Xian had never used this ability before, because the divine wings energy was very rare. However, it seemed that he had no choice but to use it now. If it was not useful, could he still use the ancient divine talisman? Alright, since that is the case, let's use it. System, I want to use all the divine wings energy to possess a random ancient god. Yi Xian ordered loudly. Ding! The host now has 30% of the divine wings energy. Do you wish to use all of it? Yes, use all of it. Boom! A boundless power that made everyone want to prostrate themselves in worship suddenly erupted from Yi Xian's body. No matter who it was, no matter what cultivation base they had, they all felt an absolutely terrifying crushing pressure at this moment. Yes, it was crushing pressure. It was crushing pressure. Yi Xian's body erupted with an incomparably valiant aura. Chapter 2276. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. A set of armor appeared on his body. No one knew what kind of armor it was, and the God Slayer in his hand had turned into an ancient black greatsword. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGG. Beside him, there was an illusory shadow. Yi Xian finally understood the true purpose of the God Slayer replica. Indeed, Yi Xian was still Yi Xian. His strength had not increased, but the key was the equipment. These were all the equipment of the gods before they died. In other words, the most important purpose of the God Slayer replica was not to let Yi Xian obtain the power of the gods who had died. It was to let Yi Xian experience using the magical equipment of the super strong when they were alive. Ding! System notification. Host has successfully used the God Slayer replica. Ding! Congratulations to Host for successfully replicating the nameless ancient god. Ding! Because Host is using the God Slayer replica with 30% of its power, all magical equipment possessed will have 30% of the original power. Ding! Congratulations to Host. The God Slayer has been strengthened by the Black Demon Sword. You have obtained the special mystique, Crushing Light. Ding! Congratulations to Host. You have obtained the Black Demon Armor. Defense increased tenfold. Ding! Host has obtained the Black Demon Armor special ability, Black Demon Summon. Ding! Congratulations to Host for obtaining the Shadow Servant. Host has obtained the special ability, Servant Battle. Servant Fusion. A series of notifications allowed Yi Xian to understand how to use the God Slayer replica. At the same time, it also brought Yi Xian many unexpected benefits. Very good. Yi Xian spat out 2 words. He was cheering for the duplication of the gods, as well as the wings of the gods. Fortunately, he had not used the wings of the gods. Otherwise, he would not have been able to obtain these items. At this moment, Kuan Buyu's attack arrived. Yi Xian did not hesitate and swept his sword over. Boom! A violent force was released. Kuan Buyu's attack, which he had been confident in, was actually blocked by Yi Xian. What kind of divine ability is this? Kuan Buyu looked at Yi Xian in astonishment. He didn't know what kind of divine ability Yi Xian had used to transform into a completely different person. Haha, this isn't a very magical ability. It's just borrowing the power of the ancient gods. Hua! How could this not be a special divine ability? Everyone was once again shocked by Yi Xian. They didn't know how many unknown tricks this Yi Xian had up his sleeve. Ancient gods, that was the power of the ancient gods. If he could borrow the power of the ancient gods, then what couldn't he do? The ancient gods had always been the incarnations of powerful beings. The bloodline of the ancient deities, the magic treasures of the ancient deities, and the divine abilities of the ancient deities. All kinds of things passed down, as long as they had the word ancient in them, seemed to have infinite power. But now, Yi Xian could actually borrow the power of the ancient gods and use it for himself. This kind of technique was simply unprecedented. Who is that guy? How can he be so strong? How many more secrets does he have? This guy, I thought he would definitely lose this time. How? How can he come up with such a shocking technique again? It's over, it's over. Could it be that Kuan Buyu is going to lose too? Who is it? Who can defeat him? The crowd was in an uproar. It was precisely because Yi Xian's display of strength had exceeded everyone's expectations that they were even more afraid and terrified. At the same time, they also hoped that someone could defeat Yi Xian. Kuan Buyu, do your best. It was unknown who took the lead to shout this, but in an instant, everyone followed suit and shouted. Towards the end, it turned into a unified voice. Kuan Buyu, Kuan Buyu, Kuan Buyu. Almost everyone was shouting Kuan Buyu's name, as deep down, they were hoping that someone would be able to defeat this monstrous existence. Defeat Yi Xian. Her Highness, Fian, and the others were very unhappy, but they were also very happy. Because the more these people were like this, the more it showed that they were afraid of Yi Xian. Of course, the two people in the arena had no idea what was going on outside. They couldn't even see outside. This arena secret realm allowed people outside to see what was going on inside and even hear what the people inside were saying. However, the people inside couldn't sense what was going on outside at all. It could be considered a special secret realm. At this moment, Kuan Buyu sensed the powerful energy erupting from Yi Xian's body. Without any hesitation, he said to Yi Xian, Yi Xian, pay attention. I'm going to undo my special seal. Once this seal is undone, my mind will change greatly. Remember, if you can't win, immediately withdraw from the battle. When that happens, my mind will be damaged and I won't be able to control my actions. Was Kuan Buyu going to undo the seal in his body? He was going to use the last of his true strength. Yi Xian nodded. Although he didn't know why Kuan Buyu would say such a thing, Yi Xian would forgive him for everything he did after Kuan Buyu said those words. Seal, first seal, undone. Suddenly, Kuan Buyu's strength doubled, and a powerful energy erupted from his body. At the same time, the system notification sounded. Ding! Host, please take note. The target's strength has increased. Currently, he is a 7th grade general upper class true god. The title of the front crown directly increased by 1 level. From the soldier rank to the general rank? Yi Xian was slightly stunned. He didn't expect this guy to be able to increase his title of the front crown. He was indeed an opponent worthy of a battle. Yi Xian, I'm coming. Kuan Buyu undid the first seal and his battle intent skyrocketed. However, he didn't lose his mind. Therefore, before he made his move, he still reminded Yi Xian. In an instant, the two of them were entangled again. However, the ancient armor on Yi Xian's body and the ancient black demon sword in his hand were definitely not to be trifled with. Therefore, he was still suppressing Kuan Buyu for a while. Kuan Buyu's battle intent grew stronger and stronger. Every time he lost, he didn't give up. Instead, it stimulated his battle instincts. Suddenly, Kuan Buyu roared. Seal, second seal, undone. Boom! Kuan Buyu's strength skyrocketed again. Ding! System notification. Target has been upgraded to a 7th grade King upper class true god. King rank. He had actually upgraded to the King rank. Even Yi Xian was incomparably shocked. This guy had actually upgraded to the King rank in an instant. Damn you, I'm going to kill you. Kuan Buyu's voice sounded. Yi Xian finally understood why this guy had warned him before unlocking his strength. The price for unlocking his strength was losing his mind. However, Yi Xian smiled slightly. Chapter 2277. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The battle continued. The two of them attacked each other in a frenzy, neither backing down. Yi Xian was sent flying again and again, while Kuan Buyu was not faring much better. 135, 7924? 6810 GGGGGD. At this moment, the two of them seemed to have forgotten that they could still use seals and divine talismans. Instead, they were using their strongest strength to clash fiercely. The battle between the two of them caused the space in the arena to fluctuate continuously. The sect had no choice but to send out people to reinforce the seal of the mystic realm in the arena. The battle between the two of them was extremely intense. However, the people outside the arena were even more excited than them. A battle of this level could be said to be the most intense battle they had ever seen. At this moment, countless people had gathered around Yi Xian and Kuan Buyu's arena. There were people from the sect, people from outside the sect, and even people from the Kuan Luan realm. Two good seedlings. I didn't expect them to meet each other. This time, I will make an exception. No matter who wins, the loser will be allowed to continue the battle. Yes, both Yi Xian and Kuan Buyu had received the approval of the Kuan Luan realm's envoy, who allowed them to continue the battle. With this sentence, it was equivalent to acknowledging their identities and directly recruiting them. Of course, the two of them in the middle of the battle did not know. At the same time, the people from the Kuan Nan family also arrived. Kuan Buyu was the heir of the Kuan Nan family. This was without a doubt. Kuan Buyu's battle naturally attracted the attention of the Kuan Nan family. However, this time, they were more focused on Yi Xian. In the eyes of the Kuan Nan family members, it was simply impossible for someone to be able to face off against their crown prince after he had unlocked the second seal. However, this was only the beginning of their shock. I want you dead. I want you dead. Third seal, unlocked. At this moment, Kuan Buyu had completely lost his mind. As his powers were unlocked, all that was left of him was his battle instincts and the desire to defeat Yi Xian. This was not something that could be controlled. Even though Kuan Buyu had not said that he was going to kill Yi Xian at the start, with the removal of his 3 seals, his intelligence had basically disappeared. All that was left was his battle instincts and the will to kill. Ding. System notification. Warning. Warning. Target strength has increased to the 7th stage True God realm. Emperor rank. An Emperor-level title. Yi Xian was shocked in his heart. An Emperor tier had actually appeared. One had to know that Yi Xian had yet to encounter an Emperor tier powerhouse until now. This guy was the first one he had encountered. Boom. One punch. With just one punch, Yi Xian was sent flying. Ding. Warning. Warning. The host is in mortal danger. The system has automatically taken over the defense and activated the Godslayer's special ability. Absolute defense. Ding. Threat contact. Ding. Warning. Warning. The designated target is too powerful. It is recommended that the host withdraw from the battle immediately. Withdraw from the battle. No, Yi Xian would not withdraw from the battle. This was the kind of battle that Yi Xian wanted. It had been a long time since Yi Xian had felt so hot-blooded. A battle of this level was the kind of battle that Yi Xian dreamed of. System. Shut up. I will not give up on this battle. I will persevere until the end, even if I lose. Ding. System notification. The host's consciousness is abnormal. Ding. System notification. The host's intelligence is in chaos. Yi Xian was about to go berserk. At this moment, the only thing left in Yi Xian's eyes was the fellow in front of him. Waves of incomparably powerful energy were continuously condensing on his body. Yes, Yi Xian was about to go berserk. System, use that ancient talisman. What's the point of keeping it? Isn't it supposed to be used now? Yi Xian's fighting spirit had been stimulated by Kuan Buyu. All that was left in his heart was the thought of going all out in this battle. Naturally, the system would not go against Yi Xian's wishes. Therefore, following Yi Xian's command, the one and only ancient talisman was immediately activated. Boom, boom, boom. Over 10,000 shadows appeared. There were actually 10,000 identical Yi Xian. Yi Xian had actually created 10,000 clones. The entire sect was in an uproar. No, it should be said that everyone was in an uproar. They had already forgotten how to speak. A battle of this level was already something that they could only worship. It could be said that even a battle between two sovereigns would not be as shocking as this. The battle between Yi Xian and Kuan Buyu had exceeded the limits of their imaginations. Boom, boom, boom. Any one of Kuan Buyu's attacks, even if it was just a casual attack, would shatter one of Yi Xian's clones. However, over 10,000 clones still charged towards Kuan Buyu in a frenzy. This was because Yi Xian's main body was now on the verge of going berserk. Therefore, in reality, those clones were also incomparably frenzied. The battle was unprecedentedly intense. At this moment, it was no longer something that the few elders of the sect could control. If the two of them really were to engage in a battle to the death, it was not something that the few elders could stop. Let's go to the arena space. The people from the Kuan Nan clan stood up. Along with the Kuan Nan clan, a few other overgod powerhouses also stood up, including the Kuan Luan realm's emissary. Regardless of whether it was Yi Xian or Kuan Buyu, neither of them should die here. They were the true geniuses of the entire Kunlun God domain. They were the pride of the Kunlun God domain. So many powerhouses had entered the arena secret realm just in case. If the battle between the two of them really could not be separated, they could only step in to stop it. This was to prevent the two of them from dying because of their frenzied slaughter. The death of any one of them would definitely be a great loss to the Kunlun God domain. Kill! Suddenly, Yi Xian's roar rang out. Finally, Yi Xian had gone berserk. The berserk ability could only be activated when Yi Xian was greatly stimulated. And now, Yi Xian had been greatly stimulated by Kuan Buyu. It was large enough for Yi Xian to launch an incomparably violent attack. It was large enough for Yi Xian to go berserk. Between Yi Xian's hands, seals and talismans constantly appeared. After going berserk, Yi Xian did not care about anything else. In his mind, there was only the thought of defeating the guy in front of him. As for the rest, Yi Xian did not think too much about it. The battle instantly intensified once more. The two people in the arena were like two madmen, attacking each other wildly. That battle had frightened everyone watching the competition. Even the overgod powerhouses were shocked beyond words. The strength of these two people was clearly only at the true god realm. Why did they erupt with such powerful strength? Overgod realm was a general term. In fact, godly lords, godly kings, and the like could all be considered as overgods. However, only Yi Xian would understand this when he entered the overgod realm. Each major realm had its own rules. Without strength, it was very difficult to understand the secrets within. Of course, in the berserk state, how could one think so much? Otherwise, how could it be defined as berserk? The two frenzied figures tangled together in the arena secret realm. Neither was willing to back down. You punch, I kick. These two guys were actually using the most primitive fighting method, fighting to the death. Outside the arena, countless people were already shocked to see this. From the initial clamor to the later silence, QWPM people were no longer biased towards either side, because these two people in front of them were worthy of their recognition. Chapter 2278. The battle continued. 1 day. 2 days. 3 days. Kuan Buyu, who had already unlocked the third seal, and Yi Xian, who was in a berserk state, would not stop their frenzied battle unless they exhausted their last bit of strength. 135, 7924? 6810 GGGGGD. Countless people watched this scene with fear and trepidation. The dozens of overgod experts also watched the battle between Yi Xian and Kuan Buyu without stopping. No one stepped forward to stop them. As long as there was no danger to their lives, they could not bear to interrupt such a battle. Yi Xian's movements were clearly much slower, and Kuan Buyu needed to gather strength for a long time just to swing his fist once. As time passed, Yi Xian's powerful physique finally revealed itself. Even Kuan Buyu, who had unlocked the third seal, was exhausted from such an intense battle. However, Yi Xian was still able to launch attacks again and again. However, even Kuan Buyu was being thrown around like a sandbag by Yi Xian. The people from the Kuan Nan family did not stop him either. Finally, Kuan Buyu stopped breathing and fainted completely. However, Yi Xian also collapsed at the same time as Kuan Buyu collapsed. The result of this battle was already revealed. Unfortunately, no one cared about the result. Both of them had received everyone's approval in this battle, regardless of whether it was strength or battle intent. By the time Yi Xian woke up, several months had already passed since the battle. Their soul-stirring battle had lasted a total of 4 months. Not to mention the time to rest. Yi Xian's powerful physique allowed him to wake up very quickly. However, Kuan Buyu did not have such a powerful physique, so he still had not woken up until now. "Master, you're awake," Fian immediately said happily when she saw Yi Xian wake up. The people from the divine talisman race in the room immediately came over to welcome him. It turned out that when Yi Xian came down from the stage, although Her Highness the Princess and the Kuan-Nan aristocratic family wanted to take Yi Xian away, Fian and the others firmly refused. It was to the extent that with a wave of his hand, he set up layers upon layers of restrictions, as if he had the intention of starting a battle at the slightest disagreement. Fortunately, everyone knew that they were Yi Xian's followers, so they didn't make things difficult for them. Otherwise, how was it possible for Fian to be the opponent of several dozen over-gods and countless true gods with just 10 rune masters? Yi Xian nodded and asked, "Where is this?" "Don't worry, young master. I've rented a manor outside for young master to recuperate. Young master can stay here at ease. I've already asked them to set up countless restrictions inside and outside the manor." Yi Xian didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Was there a need to be so secretive? Yi Xian understood what Fian meant. In Fian's heart, Yi Xian had countless secrets. Fian was worried that Yi Xian's secrets would be discovered by others. But Yi Xian himself, his biggest secret and aura was only the system. As for the rest, even if others discovered it, it didn't matter. As for the system, probably no one could discover it at all. But Fian had good intentions after all, so Yi Xian naturally wouldn't say anything. "Oh, is that so? It's fine. As long as I wake up, I'll be able to recover very quickly. By the way, what was the result of the competition?" After young master and that guy both fell unconscious, the envoy of the Kuan-Luan realm announced that the two of you didn't need to participate in the selection and were directly selected as specially recruited disciples. However, because the two of you were injured, the Kuan-Luan realm told you to go after your injuries have healed. Yi Xian nodded again, but didn't continue to say anything. Instead, he stood up and began a simple exercise. This was simply a new injury that hadn't healed yet. Fortunately, it was Yi Xian. If it was anyone else, how could they have recovered so quickly? "By the way, young master, this was sent to you by Her Highness the Princess. She said that it was a divine healing medicine." Fian handed a pill to Yi Xian. This pill was gold in color, and there was a dragon swimming on top of it. Ding! System notification. Target specified. Swimming dragon pill. It can quickly heal the host's injuries and has a chance to increase the host's cultivation. Not only can it heal injuries, it can also help to break through cultivation. This could definitely be considered a treasure. Yi Xian didn't hesitate and swallowed it in one gulp. A strong warm current flowed through Yi Xian's body. Ding! System notification. Host has broken through. Current rank 9 middle class true god realm. He could indeed break through. Rank 9 middle class true god realm? He was just one step away from becoming a high-class true god. This meant that when Yi Xian was fighting, or when he was unconscious, Yi Xian's last locked level was finally unlocked. QWPM. The locked level was because Yi Xian was the after-effect of using the level exchange. Generally speaking, when Yi Xian used a level exchange, he would be locked in one level, and when 2 levels were used, he would be locked in 2 levels. During the locked period, Yi Xian wouldn't get any experience from swallowing anything. Moreover, if he wanted to break the locked level, he could only wait. There was no way to speed it up. He could only wait for himself to break it. This was because this was the system's ultimate limit. Level exchange could be said to be able to exchange for any item. Then, the system would of course make restrictions. During the locked level period, even things like bloodline fusion couldn't be done. But now, all the levels were finally unlocked. Yi Xian obviously hoped to use the bloodline fusion stone immediately. That way, his recovery ability would be much faster. But, was that possible? With his current state, using the bloodline fusion stone would be looking for trouble. So he could only wait. "Alright, Fian, how is that Kuan Buyu?" In reply to young master, "This little girl is not very clear, but there is no danger to his life. He was just taken away by his family. Oh, is that so? Then let's go and take a look. Young master, is your body? It's fine. Look at me, am I not fine? Yi Xian said faintly. Indeed, although he was a little weak now, he could walk and jump. Fortunately, Fian was by Yi Xian's side. She had seen this kind of thing too many times and was already used to it, so she could still be considered calm. Yi Xian wanted to go out, so naturally, Fian and the people of the Divine Talisman race had to follow him. The most important thing was that the 10 people of the Divine Talisman race knew that Yi Xian was going to the Kuan family, so they actually went somewhere and got 10 sets of identical clothes. They were quite gorgeous, and they even said that these were the clothes of the followers. Have you ever seen a follower's clothes more gorgeous than the master's? However, Yi Xian didn't care about these small details. As long as these people liked it, Yi Xian wouldn't care about them. Although the headquarters of the Kuan family wasn't in Heavenly Spiral City, they still had a manor in Heavenly Spiral City. So, at this moment, Kuan Buyu was actually recuperating in Heavenly Spiral City. As for Yi Xian, his reputation was already at its peak. There wasn't a single person who didn't know of his name, and there were quite a few who had seen him in person. Chapter 2279. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Fortunately, the Heavenly Spiral School explained that Yi Xian had joined the school long ago, but he had been training outside. Fian and the others had been in the school all this time, so everyone's concerns were dispelled. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. After all, the Kuan realm's disciple selection required one to have been in the school for at least 2 years. Yi Xian's arrival was beyond the Kuan family's expectations. Although Yi Xian was only a young man, no one dared to underestimate him. Even a fool from the Kuan family knew that a person who was specially recruited by the Kuan realm and was looked upon favorably by the princess would have a limitless future. At this time, the Kuan family's doors were wide open, welcoming Yi Xian's arrival. Haha, Yi Xian, it's actually you. I didn't expect you to have recovered to this extent. It seems that the divine pill given to you by the princess is indeed different. A middle-aged man came in front of Yi Xian and laughed. Yi Xian was slightly stunned. How did they know about the wandering dragon pills period? Brat, you're really something. You didn't see how anxious Her Highness was when she saw you fainted. However, your servant said that no one was allowed to disturb you guys, so Her Highness had no choice but to leave first. But I believe that she's definitely on her way here now. Ding. System notification. Target's realm is specified. System cannot detect. Unable to detect? Then, it must be an over-god powerhouse. Yi Xian also smiled. Junior Yi Xian greets Senior. What Senior? I'm Buyu's third uncle. You can call me third uncle too. Yi Xian was slightly stunned. He still felt that it was better to call this guy Senior. You're here to see Buyu, right? You really came at the right time. Buyu just woke up, but his physique isn't as good as yours. He's lying on the bed now and can't get up. Yi Xian smiled. As long as Kuan Buyu recovered, it would be fine. Under the guidance of his third uncle, Yi Xian quickly arrived at the main hall where Kuan Buyu was recuperating. Sure enough, Kuan Buyu had indeed woken up, but his miserable appearance was much more miserable than Yi Xian's. He couldn't even lift his hand. When Yi Xian saw Kuan Buyu's expression, he suddenly laughed out loud. Looks like you're still in a more miserable state. Come, get up, let's fight another 300 rounds. You rascal, are you here to visit me or to watch me make a fool of myself? Kuan Buyu also smiled. Now that he had regained his intelligence, he naturally wouldn't be as crazy as he was in the arena. Yi Xian gave it some thought. Kuan Buyu was already worthy of being his friend. Since they were friends, they couldn't come empty-handed. But Yi Xian had indeed come empty-handed. Thinking of the wandering dragon pill that the princess gave him, Yi Xian also wanted to give this guy a good pill. System, I need to refine a pill now. I need to refine the best pill that I can refine. Can you do it? Ding. System notification. Host, please pay attention. Please do not ask the system if you can do it. Please give the order directly. Was the system throwing a tantrum? Had the humanness of the system increased again? Of course, Yi Xian wouldn't care about such small details. Instead, he said to the system. QWPM. All right, system. Now, refine a high-grade pill that is most suitable for Kun Buyu's injuries. Ding! The pill is being concocted. Success! In an instant, a pill appeared in Yi Xian's hand. However, the entire process, from the materials to the formation of the pill, was done in front of everyone's eyes. To put it bluntly, in the eyes of the crowd, this pill was refined by Yi Xian. Yi Xian, don't tell me that you're also an alchemist. Kun Buyu, who was lying on the bed, asked the question that was on everyone's mind. Yi Xian was a little embarrassed. Although he hadn't started learning how to refine pills, the system was his. In that case, Yi Xian could really be considered an alchemist. I know a little, Yi Xian said casually. However, at this moment, an old man behind Yi Xian rushed in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian, can you let me take a look at your pill? Yi Xian didn't care. He didn't even know what pill he was refining. So he handed it over without hesitation. The old man took the pill and carefully observed it. His expression changed several times. 9 Transformation Life Extending Heavenly Pill. Heavens! I never thought that this old man would actually be able to see this legendary medicinal pill in his lifetime. Fifth uncle, is Yi Xian's pill that amazing? The Kun Nan family naturally had many secondary professions. This old man was Kun Buyu's fifth uncle, who was in charge of the alchemists. Because Kun Buyu was injured, the Kun Nan family had brought their best alchemists over. Naturally, the fifth uncle had come as well. When he heard Kun Buyu's words, the fifth uncle said excitedly, "It's more than just amazing. This pill is a legendary pill. It's said that it has been lost in the divine realm. I didn't expect to see someone refining this pill with my own eyes." It said that the 9 Transformation Life Extending Heavenly Pill contains 9 special abilities. Moreover, they are all linked together and can heal the body step by step. As long as your life force is not completely gone, this pill can help you recover even if your divine spark is broken. Moreover, if you recover before the pill's effects wear off, then you can convert all of the pill's effects into your cultivation. Don't you think this pill is amazing? Everyone was aghast. There was actually such an amazing pill. However, Yi Xian didn't think much of it. To him, even if he died within 3 days, he could still be revived. Of course, this was Yi Xian's opinion. The people from the Kun Nan family didn't think so. The Kun Nan family couldn't possibly refine such a pill. Yi Xian, as far as I know, the 9 Transformation Life Extending Heavenly Pill was lost 100,000 years ago. How did you know how to refine it? Oh, I just received some inheritance, that's all, Yi Xian said casually. In any case, no one would suspect him if he said that he had received some inheritance. As expected, when they heard Yi Xian say this, everyone looked at him enviously, but they didn't ask any questions. Restriction Master, Divine Talisman Master, and now you're also an alchemist. The key is that your combat strength is actually on par with mine. Are you a monster? Kun Buyu, who was lying on the bed, wailed. He had always thought that he was a genius who had been blessed with extraordinary opportunities. He had a special ancient bloodline that could increase his combat strength by 100 times when necessary. How could he not be strong? Chapter 2280. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. In front of Yi Xian, Kun Buyu could only be reduced to an ordinary person. QWPM. How could Kun Buyu accept this? 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. But this was the truth. The Kun Nan family clan looked at Yi Xian in a different light. What was a genius? Was this what a genius was? No, Yi Xian could no longer be described as a genius. He was a freak. A freakish genius. You'd better take the pill quickly. The girl told me that the 2 of us have been specially invited to the Kun Luan realm. I'm still waiting for you to recover quickly so that we can go together. Yi Xian did not want to dwell on the topic of alchemists, so he could only say this. As for Uncle Wu, he seemed to have just remembered that the pill was made for Kun Buyu. He hurriedly fed it to Kun Buyu. Needless to say, the effects of the pill were indeed shocking. Kun Buyu had already recovered more than half of his strength after taking it. Of course, it would still take some time for him to fully recover. Her Highness the Princess has arrived. Suddenly, A loud voice sounded outside the Kuan-nan family clan. Everyone looked at Yi Xian in a different light. Although the princess had indeed visited the Kuan-nan family clan before, that was when she went to the headquarters. This time, when Kuan Buyu was injured, the princess had only comforted him a little in the arena. But now, the moment Yi Xian arrived at the Kuan-nan family clan, the princess immediately came over. Everyone was well aware of what this meant. Soon, as expected, Princess Simple rushed in. She did not even look at the others. Instead, she ran straight to Yi Xian. "Why did you come out? Have you recovered? Why did you come out?" Yi Xian was speechless. He knew his own body. He didn't have any major problems right now. But the princess had good intentions, so Yi Xian did not say much. "It's okay, I'm fine now." "All right, here you go. I personally refined it for you. Let me tell you, this is very precious. I haven't personally refined a pill for thousands of years. This time, I heard that you were seriously injured, so I spent a few months refining this pill." Boom! The faces of the entire Kuan-nan family changed greatly. Who was he? To think that even a master god would be so concerned about him, even spending a few months to refine pills for him. However, Yi Xian did not think so. In Yi Xian's heart, Yi Xian could accept the princess's friendship. However, Yi Xian was still wary of Mi Li. To be more precise, he was wary of the old man from back then. However, Mi Li had good intentions, so Yi Xian accepted it. "All right, I'll accept it then. Thank me Yen for me." If it were anyone else, they probably wouldn't have dared to call the Lord God by his name. But not only did Yi Xian call him that, even the princess did not react. If you want to thank someone, thank them yourself. I'm the one running errands every time. Humph, and I don't get any benefits at all. The princess pouted playfully. But his words only shocked the Kuan-nan family even more. The princess was the one running errands. Could it be that this guy was actually on the Lord God's side? The more they thought about it, the more shocked they became. In the end, they only dared to stop thinking about it. Because they all knew an open secret. The Lord God of the Kunlun divine domain was single to this day. Of course, that was the Lord God, the existence with the highest cultivation in the Kunlun divine domain. So, no one dared to have the slightest thought of overstepping their boundaries. Then forget it. I don't want to see your sister. I can't stand the pressure. Oh right, did you come just to give me pills? Yi Xian asked in confusion. Who's going to give you pills? I'm also a special recruit from the Kunlun divine domain. So, of course, I'm here to see if the two of you are dead. If you're not, then hurry up and get well so that we can go together. I think it'll take another 10 days. You've seen Kuan Buyu's current state. Let him set off now. If he dies of exhaustion on the way, you'll be responsible. Yi Xian said with a smile. When he was talking to the princess, no one else could get a word in edgewise. Of course, no one dared to interrupt at this time. The princess also knew that it was not appropriate for him to appear here. So, after comforting Kuan Buyu briefly, she left in a hurry. Once the princess left, the Kuan-nan family finally returned to normal. Yi Xian, can I discuss something with you? What is it? Yi Xian looked at Kuan Buyu's third uncle and asked in confusion. It's actually not that complicated. I just want to borrow one or two of your followers. Our Kuan-nan family's prohibition masters have always been a weak spot. So, I hope that your followers can teach our Kuan-nan family's prohibition masters. Oh, I see. What do you all think? Yi Xian did not act arbitrarily. After all, the people of the divine talisman race could not be considered Yi Xian's followers. We'll listen to you, sir. We'll do whatever you ask us to do. Well, Yi Xian was asking for nothing. How about this little girl? I probably won't be able to bring you all along when I go to the Kuan-luan realm this time. If the Kuan-nan family needs any help in the future, please help as much as you can. Yes, sir. This little girl understands. The people of the Kuan-nan family were overjoyed. Yi Xian had agreed. They had long noticed that Yi Xian's followers were all self-contained. Many of their prohibition refining methods were unique. Generally speaking, such people were basically ancient aristocratic families or sections. However, Yi Xian's identity was obviously very special. He could make any decision without reporting it. Of course, How could the refining methods of the divine talisman race not be special? Although there were many other people of the divine talisman race in the realm of the gods, their refining methods were different from each other. Another few days passed. Yi Xian's injuries had basically completely healed. Now, Yi Xian was preparing to fuse the bloodlines. Normally, Yi Xian should have upgraded the demigod sword god bloodline and the demigod battle god bloodline to the god level before fusing them. Only then would the effects be better. However, Yi Xian had not found a suitable material at the moment. Moreover, this bloodline fusion stone could also fuse the two bloodlines together and upgrade them to the god level. In that case, Yi Xian did not need to hold back. According to Yi Xian's thinking, the realm of the gods was full of dangers, but there were also many opportunities. In that case, rather than keeping the power in his hands, he might as well use it directly. This was because only by maintaining oneself at the peak of one's strength could one grasp opportunities when they encountered them. By upgrading the two demigod bloodlines, Yi Xian could obtain two god-level bloodlines. From there, he could fuse the main god-level bloodline. It seemed like he had profited a lot. However, if Yi Xian could not find the materials, wouldn't that mean he would be trapped forever? Chapter 2281. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Moreover, Yi Xian had a premonition that perhaps, once they reached the Kunlun realm, they would be able to obtain benefits that they wouldn't be able to obtain. Discovering a new divine bloodline didn't seem to be impossible. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. Hence, Yi Xian decided to use the Bloodline Fusion Stone. System: I want to use the Bloodline Fusion Stone to fuse the Demigod Divine Sword Bloodline and Divine War Bloodline. Ding. Host: Bloodline Fusion requirements met. Beginning fusion. Ding. Bloodline Fusion. Detected faith points that can be used for special enhancements. Host: would you like to add your believer into the fusion process? Because Yi Xian possessed Overwave City, his faith value was increasing at any time. But now, the increase was getting smaller and smaller. Yi Xian really didn't know what was the use of using this little bit of faith value to fuse with it. Fusion. However, since the system said that he could use it, Yi Xian would not let it go. Ding. Fusion continues. Detected that the host has a special resource. Automatically adding it. Ding. System notification. Host, please take note. The final fusion process is about to begin. This process may cause the host some pain. Please be mentally prepared. Yi Xian nodded and waited for the final step to begin. However, when the final step began, Yi Xian finally understood what pain was. How could this be considered a little? At this moment, Yi Xian was in so much pain that he could not even breathe. It was so painful that he could not even speak. It was so painful that he could not see. Even his spiritual will was not clear. Pain. Unbearable pain. His entire body and even his spiritual will were trembling. This final step required the removal of the two demigod bloodlines from Yi Xian's body and the insertion of a new bloodline. It also required the placement of the Eternity bloodline. This kind of pain almost caused Yi Xian to lose consciousness. After an unknown amount of time, the system notification finally sounded again. Ding. Congratulations to the host for obtaining a new divine bloodline, the Wanzun bloodline. Ding. System notification. Please take note. Host. During the fusion process, the bloodline of 10,000 Sovereign and the bloodline of Eternity have resonated. A new ability of the bloodline of Eternity has been unlocked. Ding. Congratulations to host. The Eternity bloodline's new ability has been strengthened by the bloodline of Wanzun. Host has obtained a special skill. Will Lock. Mind Lock. The host can lock onto the target with his mind and sense the location of the target at any time, no matter where it is, no matter how far away it is. This ability requires faith points. Yi Xian frowned slightly. In his eyes, this ability seemed to have the same effect as the death warrant. However, since he had obtained it, he would just treat it as a pleasant surprise. At this time, Yi Xian finally focused on his new bloodline. Wanzun bloodline. Divine bloodline. The 10,000 Sovereign bloodline could automatically absorb faith points and continuously improve. It was a bloodline that grew on its own. However, the host's faith points were currently insufficient, so this special ability was temporarily deactivated. At the same time, the 10,000 sovereign bloodline could strengthen the host's use of faith points. In the future, the exchange rate for items that required faith points would be much cheaper. The host's faith points in the 10,000 sovereign bloodline were too low, so this ability was temporarily deactivated. Yi Xian did not expect that the first thing he saw would be two things related to faith points. Although these two abilities did not have names, they were equivalent to passive abilities of the 10,000 sovereign bloodline. However, Yi Xian understood what it meant. To put it bluntly, the 10,000 sovereign bloodline required faith points to strengthen and grow on its own. When it grew to a certain extent, Yi Xian's use of faith points would increase. Not bad. Yi Xian nodded and did not say anything. He continued reading. 10,000 Sovereign Bloodline Special Ability 1. Thousand Beast Sword Servant. In this bloodline fusion, the host's Thousand Beast Sword Servant ability is retained. However, some enhancements have been made. The Thousand Beast Sword Servant is automatically bound to a God-grade mount. In the future, the Thousand Beast Sword Servant will have the authority to summon God-grade mounts. Yi Xian nodded. This meant that in the future, the God-grade mounts would be able to accompany the Thousand Beast Sword Servant in battle, and not have to be controlled by Yi Xian every time. When the Thousand Beast Sword Servant summons God-grade mounts, it can choose the number of mounts it summons according to its needs. However, the daily summon limit is still 1,000. Furthermore, the God-grade mounts that die in battle will automatically have a shared cooldown period. At the same time, the God-grade mounts have been strengthened. In the future, the God-grade mounts summoned by the host will be at least gold grade. The strength of a gold grade God-grade mount will be equivalent to the host's current realm. In other words, a gold grade God-grade mount may summon a rank 1 lower true god or a rank 9 upper true god. After that, a platinum grade mount will be able to summon God-grade divine beasts. The rules are similar and so on and so forth. In addition, there is a chance for God-grade mounts to summon a divine beast with a front crown. A divine beast with a front crown could actually appear. Yi Xian was slightly stunned. Didn't this mean that the God-grade mount's ability had been greatly strengthened this time? One had to know that the system didn't say that the mount had to have a front crown. Didn't that mean that there was a chance for a king-grade or emperor-grade mount to appear? Awesome, this was simply too awesome. Ding! System notification. The bloodline of Wan Zun retains the original host's Divine Sword bloodline and Divine Battle bloodline's physique and recovery abilities. Furthermore, the host has obtained a new special ability. Instant Recovery. Instant Recovery. No matter how heavy the damage the host receives, the host will be able to return to peak condition in an instant. The cooldown period of this ability is not fixed. The cooldown period of this ability is determined based on the damage the host received. The host is advised not to use it casually. It can be used like this? Yi Xian was slightly stunned. Although the system had advised Yi Xian not to use it casually, Yi Xian still couldn't help but want to try out this instant recovery ability. System, I want to use instant recovery now to test out this ability. Yi Xian said to the system. The system wouldn't reject Yi Xian's orders. Hence, all of Yi Xian's injuries were healed in an instant. Awesome, this ability is simply too awesome. However, Yi Xian was unhappy when he saw the cooldown period. Ding! Instant recovery cooldown period. 286 days. 286 days. Yi Xian was depressed now. His injuries clearly only needed a dozen days or even a few days to fully recover, but he had to try out this instant recovery ability. This was great, a cooldown of 286 days. Fortunately, Yi Xian at least knew what instant recovery was for. Chapter 2282. If Yi Xian encountered a powerful enemy who severely injured him, without this ability, Yi Xian would not be able to continue fighting. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. However, as long as Yi Xian was not killed instantly, he could use instant recovery. Coupled with other abilities such as the Wings of the Gods, wouldn't he be able to escape immediately? Or perhaps, if Yi Xian were to face an incomparably powerful enemy, both Yi Xian and his enemy would be injured, and then Yi Xian would instantly recover, what would happen? It could be said that this ability was for Yi Xian to save his life or use in special situations. It was not an ordinary ability. Yi Xian continued reading. He wanted to see if there were any other special abilities. Ding! Bloodline of Wan Zun special ability. Bloodline Devour. The host can strip the bloodline of any target and strengthen it for the upgrade of Wanzun bloodline. That was it? That was it? Yi Xian frowned. It seemed like this bloodline of Wanzun wasn't that impressive. Ding! System notification. Bloodline of Wanzun's hidden ability. Wanzun. After the host becomes a king of gods, this ability will be unlocked. The details are currently unavailable. There was still a hidden ability. That was more like it. However, it seemed like this bloodline of Wanzun wasn't as good as it seemed. Could it be that Yi Xian had suffered a loss this time? Of course, whether it was a loss or a gain would only be discovered in the future battles. Bloodline Devour, Thousand Beast Sword Servant, Instant Recovery, and the hidden ability, Wanzun. Although there were only 4 attributes, Yi Xian would only know if it was a loss or a gain in the future. Yi Xian heaved a sigh of relief despite his doubts. It could be said that Yi Xian was indeed a little dissatisfied with this fusion. However, he did not regret it. Yi Xian had no reason to regret what he had done. Yi Xian could refine any kind of pill, but he did not know how to refine regret pills. After another month, Kuan Buyu finally recovered. With the pills that Yi Xian had refined for him, his recovery was much faster than expected. Of course, it was impossible for him to fully recover. He was not Yi Xian. Once Kuan Buyu recovered, the 3 of them naturally headed to the Kunlun realm. In order to wait for Yi Xian and Kuan Buyu, as well as the princess, there was a Kunlun envoy stationed at the Heavenly Jade sect. In turn, the Kunlun territory did not allow any followers, even if it was the princess. Therefore, at this moment, Yi Xian and the other 2 followed behind the Kunlun envoy and boarded a teleportation platform. What Yi Xian didn't expect was that the teleportation platform was actually connected to a flying boat. As soon as Yi Xian and the others arrived, the flying boat quickly started moving and moved towards the distance with extreme speed. It was said that the Kunlun realm was an independent secret realm. It was extremely well hidden, and it was impossible for ordinary people to discover it. No one knew exactly where it was. About 3 days later, Yi Xian and Yi Xian finally arrived at the Kunlun realm. However, the Kunlun realm did not have only a few thousand people like Yi Xian had thought. Instead, it was a city with close to 1 million people. QWPM. Haha, you must be wondering why there are so many people in the Kunlun realm. Actually, there is nothing to be surprised about. In our Kunlun realm, we are allowed to stay for up to 50,000 years. That is to say, as long as you want to, you can stay here for up to 50,000 years. That is why there are so many people here. That's not right. We recruit 100 people every 30 years, 1,000 in 300 years, 10,000 in 3,000 years. Even after 300,000 years, there will only be 100,000 people. According to what you said, we can only stay for 50,000 years. Even if everyone stays here, it is impossible for there to be 1 million people after 50,000 years. Moreover, it is impossible for all of them to not die and not leave. Kuan Buyu said in shock. He was shocked by the number of geniuses. Of course, Yi Xian was also shocked. After all, the Kunlun realm would only recruit the most talented people. 1 million people. Wouldn't that be 1 million geniuses? However, 1 million was not a big number, but it was also not a small number. There were many factions in the 8th layer of heaven that had more than 1 million people. However, if they accidentally offended a super strong person, they could very well be wiped out. Then, these 1 million people would be reduced in an instant. This question was answered by the princess. Now, Yi Xian also knew the princess's name. She was called Miyu. Miyu looked at Kuan Buyu and Yi Xian and said indifferently, in name, the Kunlun realm only recruits disciples for the 3 great sections. However, in reality, if the geniuses in the army have special achievements, they will also be recruited. Also, the aristocratic families have some quotas. Don't you know? Kuan Buyu was embarrassed. His family had special quotas, but as the heir, he did not know. Fortunately, no one would argue with them on this issue. Under the guidance of the envoy, Yi Xian had a basic understanding of the Kunlun realm. In the Kunlun realm, it was impossible to divide the resources equally. Therefore, the Kunlun realm set up 3 major tests: the ranking board, the luck board, and the points board. The 3 lists were directly tied to each person's identity token, allowing them to see it directly. The ranking board tested one's combat strength. If one wanted to challenge someone, Then they would fight directly. The winner would replace the loser's ranking. The luck board was a large-scale test held every year. Whether one participated or not, it was up to one's choice. However, once one participated, one was responsible for their own life and death. Moreover, it was allowed to kill one's opponent and rob them of everything. It was the cruelest test. As for the points board, it was up to one to accept missions and earn points. The point system seemed to be popular in every faction. This was because this system was simple and easy to manage. It was also convenient for everyone to know. In the first 3 years of the ranking board, the top 3 of the points board were those who were qualified to comprehend the laws that year. It could be said that the rules of the Kunlun realm were very simple. It was also very direct. If one did not like to kill, then do missions. Through points, one could obtain the opportunity to comprehend the laws. If one wanted to solve the problem through battle, then go to the ranking board and speak with one's strength. Of course, if one liked to kill and rob, then there was also the luck board waiting for one. However, it was clear that the roll of fortune was not recognized. Therefore, it directly led to the roll of fortune not being able to enter the roll of fortune to comprehend nomological laws. Yi Xian did not care so much. Anyway, to him it did not matter what method was used. As long as he could comprehend the laws, that was enough. Suddenly, Kuan Buyu asked a surprising question. Then, if one is ranked on both lists, will there be special privileges? The envoy looked at Kuan Buyu in surprise and said with a smile, "If you have the ability to be ranked on both lists, then you can have the opportunity to comprehend 2 laws at the same time." Kuan Buyu nodded and did not speak. Chapter 2283. However, it's already very difficult to enter the top 3 on one list. It's almost impossible to enter both lists. The emissary added. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. However, the speaker might not have meant it, but the listener did. At this moment, Yi Xian began to calculate in his heart. Since he could obtain 2 chances as long as he entered the top 3 on both lists, why didn't Yi Xian cherish it? 6 laws of nature origins? Yi Xian wanted to comprehend all of them. However, for now, perhaps the most important thing was to increase his strength. Perhaps true gods were still the majority here, but Yi Xian believed that there were quite a few overgods as well. Suddenly, a ray of light appeared in the distance. The light did not dissipate, so one could tell at a glance that someone had broken through. Has someone broken through to the Godly King realm? The emissary said subconsciously. Godly King realm? Yi Xian was a little puzzled. He asked the emissary, "Senior, are there still godly kings here?" Haha, Yi Xian, aren't you looking down on me a little? The Overgod realm is a major realm. The Overgod realm includes the Godly Lord realm, Godly King realm, Godly Emperor realm, Godly Venerable realm, and Godly Emperor realm. However, they are collectively known as the Overgod realm. Don't tell me you think that the Overgod realm is just a single realm? So that's how it is. Yi Xian was slightly surprised. It seemed that sometimes, one could only understand things at a certain level after reaching a certain level. And without reaching that level, even if one knew, it might not be correct. In fact, Yi Xian had always thought that the Overgod realm was just a single realm. However, he did not expect that the Godly King realm was actually a combination of the 5 realms. At this moment, Yi Xian's doubts were all resolved. He finally understood why there was such a huge difference in status between overgods. He also finally understood that, for example, the world of Kunnan had dozens of overgods, but it was still only an aristocratic family. It could not even be considered a major aristocratic family, let alone an ancient aristocratic family. As it turned out, the fundamental reason lay in the division of the Overgod realm. The Overgod realm was not a single realm, but a collective name for 5 different realms. For the next month, Yi Xian was in a learning mode. Mi Yu was a princess, so there was no one who didn't know her. Kuan Bu Yu, on the other hand, was a member of an aristocratic family, so he had some acquaintances as well. However, Yi Xian didn't have any friends at all. Aside from Mi Yu and Kuan Bu Yu, very few people would take the initiative to interact with him. This made Yi Xian very happy. Of course, in the Kuan Luan realm, there were also side professions such as skills, seals, and talismans. However, Yi Xian didn't really care about this. With the help of the system, the Yi Xian wouldn't be interested in those normal Yi Xian professions, but the Kuan Luan realm wouldn't be able to provide those that were too strong. It was the same for mystiques. Ordinary mystiques were nothing to Yi Xian. However, his current strength was too weak. If he really wanted to participate in the ranking battle, he wouldn't be able to achieve a good result. Rather than that, Yi Xian might as well accept missions. Missions required points to be accepted at a special hall. On this day, Yi Xian came to the hall. "Hello, I need to accept a mission." Yi Xian said to the disciple. "True God Realm missions? Go take a look yourself. There are detailed descriptions. If you want to accept them, just accept them with your divine sense." Yi Xian nodded and went straight to the place where the missions were issued. However, Yi Xian didn't think much of the missions he saw. There was even a mission to investigate the battle between the ancient giant and the thousand-feeler sea beast in the Drought Sea. It was obviously a battle between Yi Xian and the thousand-feeler sea beast. Moreover, it had been so long. He didn't expect the Kunlun realm to still have such a mission. It could be said that Yi Xian was very disappointed after looking at dozens of missions. Just as he was about to take a look at the Immortal Lord level missions, one mission caught Yi Xian's attention. The description of this mission roughly described how there were hundreds of extermination of clans and sects because of totem beasts in the border areas of the Kunlun realm. There was a mysterious force that kept stealing the totem beasts. Totem beasts. Totem beasts again. One had to know that when Yi Xian was in the 100 territories of Mo, he encountered an incident where a large number of totem beasts were stolen. At that time, no one cared about a small place like the 100 territories of Mo. As a result, the extermination organization successfully revived an ancient demon god. Even now, there was still no news from Yi Xian. It could be said that Yi Xian knew very well how powerless those who asked for help were. Just like the 100 territories of Mo, if not for Yi Xian, if not for everyone's alliance, if not for the countless sacrifices of countless people, the consequences would be unimaginable. However, this mission was not valued at all in the Kunlun realm. It was only worth 100 points. Yi Xian frowned. Just like the 100 territories of Mo, who would care about such a small place? For a place like the Kunlun realm that had millions of territories, who would care about a mere 100 territories, and an insignificant and remote place at that? Who would care about what happened there, the life and death of the people there? No, other people did not care, but Yi Xian did. He knew very well that if he allowed the extermination organization to continue like this, it would become a huge disaster sooner or later. Don't forget, he had a terrifying mission punishment. Therefore, Yi Xian accepted this mission without hesitation. One could leave the Kunlun realm through a teleportation portal. And it was to teleport Yi Xian directly to a big city at the border. This place was only 800 territories away from the small area where they were seeking help. Yi Xian used a carriage and did not need much time. Lin Feng sect had 67 territories under its control. It was smaller than the 100 territories of Mo, but its overall strength was stronger. It was different from Mo Xianghu. Mo Xianghu had been turned into a puppet by the extermination organization. But Lin Feng sect did not. At this moment, the people of Lin Feng sect had joined forces with all the other forces in the Kunlun realm to defend against the attacks of an unknown organization. This organization's main objective seemed to be to steal the totem beasts. Of course, if that was all, they might be able to accept it. But every time this organization attacked, they would kill everyone in their target. Until now, a total of 32 sects and clans had been attacked within the territory of the Lin Feng sect. There was only one exception. These 32 forces, from young children to old men who were on the verge of godhead exhaustion, were all slaughtered. It could be said that in the entire Lin Feng sect, everyone was in danger. Many sects were even willing to hand over their totem beasts to other sects or chase them away. But even so, it was impossible to completely avoid that mysterious organization. Yi Xian was extremely fast and arrived at Lin Feng sect in no time. Chapter 2284. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. However, Yi Xian's strength made them worried. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. Yi Xian was only an intermediate grade 9 true god, while the sect leader of the Lin Feng sect was already an upper grade 3 true god. How could they not be worried? Sir Envoy, may I ask when the deity domain's army will arrive? The sect leader of the Lin Feng sect asked Yi Xian carefully. After all, although Yi Xian's cultivation level was lower than his, He was still the deity domain's envoy. He did not dare to offend him. What army? Yi Xian was puzzled. He looked at the report and asked casually. Could it be that the deity domain only sent you here to support us? Yes, just me. Hearing Yi Xian's reply, many people wailed. It couldn't be, just him. A mere mid-level true god realm brat? What use could he be? Was the deity domain giving up on them? Yi Xian could guess what these people were thinking. However, Yi Xian was not angry. After all, Yi Xian was only an intermediate-grade true god. This was the truth. Therefore, it was reasonable for these people to be disappointed. However, as far as Yi Xian was concerned, he wasn't prepared to ask them for help this time. According to your current information, this Plum Valley Villa will most likely become the next target of the enemy. Plum Valley Villa has already amassed more than 3,000 totem beasts, and their strength is not very strong. I think that the mysterious power will not let them go. Who can lead the way for me? I want to go to Plum Valley Villa. Yi Xian said to these people. An elder of the Linfeng sect stepped forward. Sir Envoy, let me lead the way for you. Yi Xian nodded and followed the envoy to Plum Valley Manor. In fact, Plum Valley Manor also knew that it was very dangerous to collect so many totem beasts. Therefore, at this time, the entire manor was already on high alert. They even temporarily recruited some rogue cultivators to prepare for a fight to the death. It turned out that Plum Valley Villa's plan from the very beginning was to fight against that mysterious power. The Linfeng sect only knew how to ask for help, but they didn't organize the forces within their borders to launch an effective counterattack. They gathered a large amount of strength, but only knew how to defend. This had already caused the people of Plum Valley Manor to be extremely disappointed. This was also the reason why the Linfeng sect was still in a state of disunity. That was because the Linfeng sect was too cowardly. Yi Xian's arrival came as a surprise to Plum Valley Manor. This was especially true when they heard that Yi Xian was an emissary from God's realm. This made the people of Plum Valley Manor even more excited. Therefore, when Yi Xian arrived, the Villa Master of Plum Valley Villa handed over all the authority without hesitation. QWPM, Manor Lord. Gather all the old and weak people in the manor's main hall. I will set up a restriction there to prevent the enemy from attacking. All right, Lord Envoy, I'll get someone to arrange it immediately. Young Master, go and evacuate everyone to the Beast Valley. Except for the necessary security personnel outside, leave no one else. Ah, Lord Envoy, are you going to give up the defense of other places in the manor? The young master asked doubtfully. For them, the manor was their home. They were unwilling to take a step back. Yes, give up all the places except for the Beast Valley and the main hall. You have to know that the mysterious power is definitely not something you can fight head-on. Instead of that, it's better to just give up and concentrate all your strength to guard one place. At least, guarding one place can be the greatest use of strength, and not just send you to your deaths. All right, Lord Envoy, I understand. According to Yi Xian's instructions, the entire manor quickly moved. They gave up what should be given up, and moved everything that could be moved away. Yi Xian had set up more than a dozen large-scale defensive restrictions, including the invincible restriction, in the main hall. Yi Xian had set up hundreds of attack restrictions in the Beast Valley. Of course, there was also an invincible restriction to take care of the injured. This mission was a rescue mission and could be considered very troublesome. However, the points were only 100. This was also the reason why no one had asked about it. But Yi Xian was different. Therefore, when he carried out the mission, he did not consider the mission itself. While Yi Xian was setting up, sure enough, it was as he had expected. That mysterious force had quietly begun to inquire about the actual situation of the Plum Valley Manor. Although they had inquired about the layout of the Plum Valley Manor and also found out about the arrival of Yi Xian, they did not care at all. Soon, a surprise attack team composed of thousands of people rushed toward the Plum Valley Manor. They rampaged all the way without the slightest hindrance until they reached the Beast Valley. Haha, this mere Plum Valley Manor actually wants to compete with us. It's simply courting death. Brothers, kill to your heart's content and enjoy yourself. As soon as they rushed over, a guy in the lower True God realm shouted incomparably loudly. However, he soon welcomed retribution. At this time, from the Beast Valley, a figure flew over and looked directly at those people. Who are you? Yi Xian asked in a flat tone. Haha, who are we? Boy, you don't care who we are. You just need to know that none of you will survive. Haha. It was still the lower true god who spoke before. At this moment, he was simply arrogant to the extreme. And the others also laughed with that person, not putting Yi Xian in their eyes at all. Suddenly, Yi Xian stretched out his hand, pointed downward, and then said softly, "True 6 syllables, die. Die. Die." Wherever Yi Xian pointed, that place would immediately become a land of death. One by one, mysterious people died in large numbers before they could even figure out what was going on. In the blink of an eye, nearly 100 people died directly. Terrifying. In just an instant, a sense of horror emerged in everyone's hearts. Who exactly was this guy? How could he have such terrifying strength? With a casual point of his finger, groups of people fell down. Inexplicably, their divine personas shattered and died. Moreover, even those in the true god realm were no exception. Among these fallen people, there were actually 3 middle-ranked true gods and 5 low-ranked true god realm powerhouses. How was this possible? 5 true god realm powerhouses were enough to sweep across Plum Valley Manor. But now, they didn't even have the qualifications to speak and were casually murdered. I'll ask you again. Who are you? Who ordered you to plunder the totem beasts? Yi Xian was still casually standing proudly in mid-air. Beside him, 13 divine talismans were constantly rotating, as if they would fall on the people opposite in the next moment. What a terrifying power, what a valiant power. Chapter 2285. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, ding. System notification. Host has gained faith points. Yes, I have gained faith points. 1357924. 6810 GGGGGD. Yi Xian was slightly delighted. This was an unexpected gain. Of course, some people were happy while others were worried. At this time, the mysterious people were all panicking, but still, no one said anything. In that case, you can all go to hell. The 13 divine talismans were activated immediately. This was a crushing battle. These people were no match for Yi Xian. Moreover, the 13 divine talismans prepared by Yi Xian were extremely powerful. In an instant, the entire valley echoed with cries of agony. Unfortunately, Yi Xian did not care at all. Whether it was the cries or the screams, when these people were killing others, did they ever think that this day would come? Why did Yi Xian not hesitate to attack? The reason was very simple. Yi Xian knew that these thousands of people were just the vanguard. In fact, there were a few people silently observing the situation in the distance. Obviously, they were going to report the situation here. Yi Xian wanted to lure the snake out of its hole. He wanted all the mysterious people to come over. The battle ended much faster than expected, and it was also much easier than expected. When Yi Xian took the interspatial rings of those people and landed on the ground, the people of Plum Valley Manor had already knelt in front of Yi Xian. Perhaps Yi Xian's intermediate true god cultivation was doubtful at first, but when Yi Xian displayed his powerful combat strength, there was only worship in these people's hearts. Yi Xian did not pay too much attention to these people. After all, Yi Xian knew that the real battle had not yet begun. The real battle was yet to come. System. Detect if there are any special resources. If there are none, devour them all. Ding! Host has broken through. Current Stage 1 Upper True God Realm. Without any special resources, the thousands of interspatial rings only allowed Yi Xian to upgrade by 1 level. It was indeed much more difficult to upgrade now. Of course, Yi Xian was already mentally prepared. The next 3 days were rather peaceful. However, on the 4th day, what was supposed to come finally came. A huge army of more than 50,000 people finally charged towards the Plum Valley. Yi Xian's plan had succeeded. He had successfully lured the entire mysterious army to Plum Valley Manor. At this time, the direction of the Plum Valley Villa had already become the focus of everyone in the Maple region. Many people knew that the sacred emissary had led the people of the Plum Valley Mountain Villa to battle. Furthermore, he had already obtained a victory. However, due to their fear of the mysterious power, many people were still in a wait-and-see state. To be honest, Yi Xian could only say that such a person deserved to die. What was the use of them just standing there and watching? Did they really think that they would be safe if they didn't participate in the war? Yi Xian was very clear about Annihilation's methods. Therefore, Yi Xian also understood that even if these people did not participate in the battle, once Annihilation saw their weakness, they would kill them one by one. In fact, watching from the sidelines was just waiting for death. However, Yi Xian did not want to care so much. To Yi Xian, the life and death of these people had nothing to do with him. They could do whatever they wanted. Yi Xian looked down on such cowardly people. When the mysterious army finally arrived, the Plum Valley Villa did not panic at all because Yi Xian was still there. Yi Xian was still leading them. As long as Yi Xian was in the Plum Valley Villa, they would not be afraid. Damned Plum Valley Villa, I will definitely flatten this place and avenge our dead brothers. Brothers, charge and flatten Plum Valley Villa. An upper-level true immortal shouted loudly. However, he himself was hiding behind the crowd. Brothers? Yi Xian was concerned about this name. Why did this guy call others that? Yi Xian subconsciously took a few more glances at that guy. Of course, Yi Xian was not in the mood to care at this moment. Everyone in Plum Valley Villa, I don't want to say too much. This is your home. Whether you want to protect your home or not is your own business. Now I will fight with you. As long as you don't stop fighting, then I will not stop either. Yi Xian did not have any impassioned battle mobilization because these people did not need to be mobilized at all. They knew very well why they were fighting. Perhaps they could not protect these totem beasts, but it was impossible for them not to protect their family. Behind them was their home. A battle to the death was their only choice. Kill. In an instant, both sides erupted with extremely powerful auras. It could be said that the Plum Valley Villa side did not have the advantage in numbers. However, because of Yi Xian's arrangement, they only needed to defend the entrance of the Beast Valley. If those mysterious people wanted to try other places, whether it was Yi Xian or the people of Plum Valley Villa, they were very welcome. This was because apart from the entrance, Yi Xian had already set up restrictions in other places. Of course, the mysterious organization was not aware of this at all. Therefore, they finally sent out a branch force to try to bypass the front of the valley. Unfortunately, they were soon met with destruction. Those who attacked from the ground were better off. They were only trapped by the restrictions. As long as their reaction was fast enough, they still had a chance to escape. However, those who wanted to fly over from the sky were not so lucky. Boom! 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 Continuous roars sounded. Those were the consequences of those who tried to bypass the valley. In the front of the valley, the killing was incomparably bloody. Broken limbs littered the ground. Here there was no reason to speak. There was only killing. Yi Xian watched all this quietly. It was not that Yi Xian was indifferent, nor was it that Yi Xian did not make a move. QWPM, but now, he could not make a move. His experience in the 100 territories of MO told Yi Xian. If these people were truly from the Annihilation Organization, there would definitely be an expert among them. Yi Xian was precisely waiting for the appearance of that expert. The battle continued. One could say that the overall strength of the Plum Valley Manor was still too weak. Fortunately, they were able to maintain their advantage due to their geographical advantage. However, such an advantage would not last long. Could it be that Yi Xian had guessed wrongly and no Annihilation Organization members had participated in this battle? Yi Xian casually raised his hand, and a mysterious power was suddenly activated. Mantra of the 6 syllables, life. In an instant, several hundred Plum Valley disciples that had died in battle were resurrected. Next, Yi Xian's hand started glowing once again. Those heavily injured Plum Valley disciples were pleasantly surprised to find that their wounds were healing rapidly. Even their internal injuries were healing rapidly. Countless people looked at Yi Xian. In their eyes, apart from worship, there was also fear. However, Yi Xian did not care at all. As far as Yi Xian was concerned, this was merely a matter of convenience. His goal was to wait for the appearance of that expert. Suddenly, the system's alarm sounded. Ding! Warning! Warning! Detection of a powerful attack. Boom! A ray of light rushed towards Yi Xian. Fortunately, Yi Xian had been on guard, so this attack missed. Chapter 2286. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. Needless to say, Yi Xian knew that the person who had ambushed him was from the Annihilation Organization. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. After all, Yi Xian's resurrection skill was too powerful. It was beyond everyone's imagination. No one knew how Yi Xian did it, but everyone knew that if Yi Xian were to continue like this, then the final result would be that they would be exhausted to death. You're asking for it. Yi Xian moved and charged towards the person who had ambushed him. Because he had been on high alert, Yi Xian had already discovered the person the moment he made his move. This person had disguised himself as an ordinary disciple and blended into the crowd. Although Yi Xian did not know why he did so, he was too naive to think that he could avoid Yi Xian's detection. Deicide slash. Yi Xian held the God-Slayer in his hand and slashed out in an instant. The sword light immediately scattered in the air. 7 sword lights blasted into the crowd. Boom! 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 At least dozens of people were directly killed. As for the person who ambushed Yi Xian, he actually exploded with a one-hit kill and was instantly killed. Kill! Seeing Yi Xian's ferocity, these people were not frightened. Instead, they charged towards Yi Xian. This was because they knew that Yi Xian was the real commander. If they killed Yi Xian, they would be victorious. Yi Xian smirked. With a wave of his hand, a dozen divine talismans appeared. Since these people wanted to die, Yi Xian did not mind fulfilling their wishes. Divine talismans were Dharma treasures that specialized in attacking. They were even more powerful than seals. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly attacked. The dozens of divine talismans immediately turned into a dance of death. It swept through the enemy's entire camp. In the sky and on the ground, the enemy was killed one by one. Some people did not even know how they died. 6 syllables, die. Spiritual control. Kill each other. For these ordinary disciples who were only at the God realm or the heavenly God realm, they weren't a threat to Yi Xian at all. With a casual wave of his hand, dozens of people would fall. At this moment, life seemed so insignificant, even if these people were gods. The moment Yi Xian attacked, the entire battle changed. Because Yi Xian was so powerful that the enemy could not do anything to him. Moreover, he was to kill to say, it was as easy as slaughtering chickens and dogs. To Yi. In a short while, the mysterious people had already retreated in shock. No one could stop Yi Xian's footsteps. 2. Once, 2 to translation 2. Yi Xian to Li to say, Yi Xian translation. As Yi Xian master. To Yi Xian was 2 to translation 2 to translation to translation. Calm. Translation. Calm. Under Yi Xian's provocation, the members of the Plum Valley's group's fighting spirit soared. They gave up on defending and changed to attacking. Yi. Retreat. The enemy finally could not resist. With Yi Xian around, they could not even gather their strength. Even a true God realm expert could be easily killed by Yi Xian, not to mention the others. It was very similar to Mo Bai Jing. Here a true God realm expert was the strongest. So, how could anyone threaten Yi Xian? The enemy retreated like the tide. Although the disciples of Plum Valley fought hard, they were outnumbered, so it was impossible for them to really annihilate the enemy. As the pursuit went deeper, it was very likely that they would be surrounded. Retreat. Retreat to the entrance of the valley. Yi Xian gave the order casually. No one dared to disobey Yi Xian's order. Yi Xian conquered everyone with his own strength. In the Battle of the Beast Valley, the mysterious people suffered heavy losses, leaving at least 3,000 corpses. However, this was something they could accept. However, the biggest significance of this battle was that after this battle, all the forces in the Linfeng sect began to pay attention to the battle here, and even sent people to prepare for support. After all, it was not that all the sects and families in the Linfeng sect did not really want to resist the enemy, but there had been no one to take the lead. Yi Xian's identity as the messenger of the God realm, coupled with the victory of the Battle of the Beast Valley, made them see an opportunity. Since they said that they could protect their homeland, since there was someone to take the lead, they naturally would not sit back and do nothing. In the following period of time, under the leadership of Yi Xian, Plum Valley Villa won again and again, and one by one, large and small sects also joined the coalition forces of Plum Valley Villa. It could be said that the bigger the battle, the smoother it was. Originally, Yi Xian thought that this time, it would be a war of attrition that would last for a while. However, to Yi Xian's surprise, that mysterious force actually disappeared inexplicably. Yes, they retreated without a fight, and even directly could not find a trace of them. Yi Xian continued to search for a few more days but still could not find them, so he could only return to the Kunlun realm and submit the mission. This time, the mission only gave Yi Xian 100 points. Of course, from the beginning, Yi Xian did not care about how many points this mission gave. He only cared about the news of the annihilation of the organization. Of course, this was not all that he had gained. The most significant gain was probably the faith points. Once again, Yi Xian went to the mission distribution office and carefully looked at the mission. Yi Xian wanted to earn points, but he was not very anxious. Yi Xian now wanted to search all the suspicious places at once. As long as there was a mission that might have information about the annihilation of the organization, Yi Xian would not let it go. Soon, Yi Xian found a new mission. QWPM, God-level mission. Mission requirement: explore the mysterious secret realm, the Mixed Yuan Mystic Realm. It was said that the Mixed Yuan Mystic Realm had been completely explored by people, and there were no noteworthy treasures inside. However, for some reason, during this period of time, a large number of gods had entered, and a lot of resources had been transported in. As no one knew what was going on, the Kunlun realm issued this mission and asked disciples to go and investigate. Although this mission did not mention anything about the possible annihilation of the organization, Yi Xian felt that it was not that simple. Therefore, Yi Xian accepted this mission. Are you sure you want to accept this mission? The disciple in charge of issuing the mission looked at Yi Xian in shock. One had to know that Yi Xian was only an upper-level true god, and it was very dangerous for him to carry out a god-level mission. Yes, I am sure. Yi Xian nodded and answered. Well, since you've made your own choice, I can't say anything. Here, this is a recording device. After you enter that place, activate this device and you'll be able to record the situation inside. When the time comes, we'll use this to judge your degree of completion and reward you with points. Yi Xian nodded. No wonder this mission did not mention what the reward would be. It turned out that the reward for this mission was uncertain. Soon, Yi Xian set out again. Chapter 2287. The primordial chaos secret realm was also located at the border of the Kunlun god domain. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. Of course, if they really wanted to destroy the organization, they could only move around in the convenient areas. Perhaps some Lord God territories had already been completely controlled by the Annihilation Organization, but at the very least, the Kunlun God territory had not yet. And for some reason, Yi Xian had a feeling that something big was about to happen. This was a baseless guess, but that was what Yi Xian felt. Moreover, Yi Xian had always trusted his intuition. However, as for what would happen, they could only wait until it happened before they knew. With the teleportation authority, Yi Xian advanced at an extremely fast speed. Therefore, it did not take long for him to arrive at the primordial mystery realm. Generally speaking, in the Master God's domain, the so-called border region could only be said to be too far away from the Master God city. It was not a true border. This was because the borders of the sovereign domains were the battlefields of the sovereigns. Every single overgod's domain, no matter how many other overgod's domains they bordered, would set up an overgod battlefield without exception. Even if there was no battle. These battlefields of sovereigns were the true borderlands. As for the other places, they couldn't be considered borders. Of course, most of the time, such a remote area would not be valued. The primordial chaos mystic realm was located in such a place. This was a slightly protruding area. Three sides of him were shattered void. There was no way to go, and only one side was the entrance. It would be one thing if that was all, but the environment here was extremely dangerous. This was a dangerous area. The laws of nature were damaged, causing chaos here. Moreover, there were many special divine beasts living here. Therefore, in reality, there was no such thing as a sect in this place. However, there were some people who came to hunt for divine beasts. Of course, that was all. After all, even the primeval chaos mystery realm had run out of resources. What attraction would this place have? However, for some reason, during this period of time, there were a large number of people coming in and out of this place. At this time, Yi Xian had already arrived at this place called the Devil's Peninsula by the locals. From the mouths of the locals who hunted mythological beasts for a living, Yi Xian found a small path that led to the interior of the Devil's Peninsula. At this moment, Yi Xian was walking on this path. It could be said that the Demon Peninsula was extremely dangerous. Yi Xian hadn't gone far when he encountered a divine beast blocking his path. Ding! System notification. Target set. First rank lower divine lord. Ding. System notification. Please take note. Host. Target mythological beast. Slight mutation. Please take note. Slight mutation? What does this mean? Yi Xian was slightly taken aback. Naturally, he focused his attention on the divine beast and carefully observed it. On the surface, this mythical beast didn't seem to be anything special. Even when Yi Xian used the system to detect it, he couldn't see anything special. Since he couldn't tell, then he would try it himself. Thousand Beast Sword Servant. Yi Xian summoned the Thousand Beast Sword Servant and let it test the divine beast first. The Thousand Beast Sword Servant was extremely fast and rushed over. However, before it could make a move, the divine beast made its move first. Roar! The divine beast roared angrily. Then, dozens of withered skeletons emerged from the ground. Yes, withered skeletons. Yi Xian had seen the withered skeleton sword servant before, but that was also true. However, this divine beast in front of him could actually emit a mysterious black aura from its body and give life to those withered skeletons. This black aura wasn't the demonic aura that Yi Xian encountered at the demonized murlocs. It was a new type of power. What is this? Yi Xian asked the system. Ding! System notification. Insufficient data. Unable to detect. QWPM insufficient data? That meant that this was something that Yi Xian had never encountered before. However, what exactly was this aura? At this moment, the Thousand Beast Sword Servant had already reached its attacking position. It waved its hand casually. 10 leveled-up mounts appeared. Then, under the Thousand Beast Sword Servant's command, the stone leveled-up mounts charged forward. This was to test the strength of those withered skeletons that had been revived. What surprised Yi Xian was that these skeletons didn't have much strength at all. The 10 divine rank mounts didn't even need to expend too much strength to directly annihilate all the skeletons. Yi Xian frowned as he watched all this. The Thousand Beast Sword Servant was still attacking continuously. However, for some reason, although the Thousand Beast Sword Servant had the initiative and was suppressing the divine beast, he felt that something was amiss. However, Yi Xian always felt that it was extremely strange. He always felt that things weren't as simple as they seemed on the surface. Suddenly, just as Yi Xian was feeling puzzled, he saw something that he couldn't believe. He saw that the withered skeletons that were crushed by the divine beast mounts were emitting a faint black aura. Then, it continued to erode the divine beast mount's consciousness. Towards the end, it was even trying to control the divine beast mounts. Although Yi Xian's divine beast mounts were absolutely loyal, they couldn't be controlled by the black aura. Even if there was no other choice, these divine beast mounts would rather disappear than be controlled. However, Yi Xian was shocked in an instant. Because Yi Xian might have come into contact with the secret of this place. Yi Xian thought of a possibility. A very likely possibility. That was that the divine beasts and humans here might have all been controlled, including the person who had given Yi Xian directions at the beginning. It was very likely that all living things here were controlled by the black aura. Why did Yi Xian think this? Was it simply because the black aura was trying to control the divine beast mounts? Of course not. Yi Xian had his own reasons for thinking this way. Because Yi Xian remembered. The person who had given him directions had a dazed expression. At the time, Yi Xian didn't think much of it, but now that he saw this scene, he realized that the dazed expression wasn't normal at all. He had to get out of here. After Yi Xian understood these things, he was greatly alarmed. He immediately retreated backwards, wanting to leave this place. But now that Yi Xian wanted to leave, how could he leave so easily? Just as Yi Xian's figure started to retreat, he realized that there were dozens of people blocking his path behind him. Ding! System notification. Target specified. Lowest cultivation level, low-level divine lord. The lowest cultivation level was low-level divine lord? That meant that Yi Xian couldn't force his way through. What should he do? Yi Xian's mind raced. He really didn't expect that this place would be completely controlled by the black aura. Chapter 2288. Yi Xian could not break through the blockade behind him. He could only run to the side. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. It could be said that once he fled, Yi Xian would fall into endless trouble. Yi Xian knew this, but what could he do? Even if he knew, how could he not run? If he did not run, he would be waiting for death. God's Blossom Sword Servants. In an instant, Yi Xian summoned the divine flower sword attendants and had them stall for time. As for Yi Xian himself, he'd already plunged into the dense forest beside him. The teleportation ability of the wings of the gods required energy to be used. Unfortunately, Yi Xian had already used up all his energy in his previous battle with Kuan Buyu. In fact, Yi Xian was feeling a little regretful. That battle had been satisfying, but now in this situation, it was not going to be easy. Wei Zhentian, magic treasure form. Yi Xian shouted. He hoped that Wei Zhentian could transform into a magic treasure that would help them in this situation, such as a flying boat or something. Unfortunately, Yi Xian also knew that there were no such things as coincidences. As expected, Wei Zhentian's 3 chances did not even allow him to transform into a flying magic treasure. Damn it, I miscalculated this time. Yi Xian was a little frustrated. Of course, no matter how frustrated he was, he did not dare to stay here any longer. After some time, Yi Xian was sure that he had escaped the pursuit of those people. Only then did he stop. But now, he did not even know where he was. This was a forest. Ancient trees so tall that they blocked out the sun, making it seem a little eerie. From time to time, some strange poisonous insects would appear. Of course, they were no threat to Yi Xian. Being trapped here is not a solution. I have to think of a way to get out of here. Yi Xian carefully walked forward, but he had only taken a few steps when the system's warning sounded. Ding! System notification. An extremely powerful divine beast has been detected ahead. It is recommended that the host change his route. There was a powerful divine beast ahead? Yi Xian did not know why the system had suddenly reminded him, but since the system had said so, Yi Xian naturally had to change his direction. However, after walking for a short while, the same system notification sounded again. Yi Xian changed his direction a few times, but it was the same result every time. Most importantly, there was a special suppression here. Yi Xian could not even activate the concealment ability of the wings of the gods. It was as if there was a mysterious power that prevented any concealment ability. Just now, Yi Xian had actually entered such a special divine beast's nest as he fled. And they were all extremely powerful divine beasts. How could this be? To be able to cause the system to give an alarm, then it was likely that it was at least a god beast at the middle-level divine lord realm or above. How could there be so many powerful god beasts here? It was impossible for the system to make a mistake, so these divine beasts really did exist. However, Yi Xian could not understand why so many powerful divine beasts had gathered in such a remote place. What did this mean? Sword Attendant Wan Sun. Yi Xian summoned the little sword attendant Wan Sun. This little guy had strong detection abilities, was very small, and was very fast. Sword Attendant Wan Sun, go and find a way out for me. Yi Xian ordered the sword attendant Wan Sun. He did not dare to act rashly now. Provoking divine beasts in a divine beast's nest was not a wise choice. If Yi Xian was not careful, he would not just provoke 1 or 2 powerful divine beasts. Yi Xian did not dare to take the risk. He carefully observed his surroundings, but the more he thought about it, the stranger it became. Normally, divine beasts were at least mid-level divine lords, and their divine senses were not weak either. In that case, it was impossible for them not to discover Yi Xian. Under normal circumstances, once divine beasts discovered an enemy, they would definitely attack immediately. However, Yi Xian had just rushed out a few times. Logically speaking, even if those divine beasts had territorial awareness, Yi Xian should have invaded their territory long ago. They should have attacked Yi Xian. However, why was Yi Xian not attacked at all? Now, Yi Xian was surrounded by these powerful divine beasts. These divine beasts clearly knew of his existence, but they did not come forward. What was going on? This situation was very strange. Yi Xian thought for a while and realized that the only explanation lay in the place he was in now. After the sword attendant Wan Sun returned, Yi Xian was even more certain of one thing. This place was very strange. System, can you do a comprehensive detection of the surroundings? See if there's anything strange about this place. Ding. System notification. Activating the detection ability requires 10,000 faith points. Would the host like to confirm? Yes, system. How many faith points do I have now? Ding. System notification. The host currently has 16,300 faith points. 16,000 faith points? QWPM Yixian clearly remembered that he had used up all his faith points the last time. Could it be that Overwave City gave him another 16,000 faith points so quickly? Logically speaking, it shouldn't be that fast. Suddenly, Yixian thought of Plum Valley Villa. Yes, Yixian had obtained faith points when he was in Plum Valley Villa. However, Yixian did not think that he could obtain much at that time, so he did not care. However, it seemed that was not the case at all. That's right. This time, Yixian went to help the Plum Valley Villa as an envoy of the Divine Realm. It could be said that he had saved the Plum Valley Villa, so in the eyes of everyone in the Plum Valley Villa, Yixian was naturally extraordinary. Therefore, after Yixian left, there were still countless people who worshipped him and had faith in him. Since he had obtained faith points, he might as well use them. System, use faith points to scan this place. Yixian said to the system. Ding. Host has used the detection ability. Ding. Scan successful. Ding. Host, please take note. A mysterious area has been discovered up ahead. Host is advised to check it out. Mysterious area? Yixian wanted to see what was so mysterious about it. Yixian didn't hesitate in the slightest and directly walked forward. After a while, what appeared in front of Yixian was a lake. A black lake. This lake was not very big and could be seen in its entirety at a glance. Furthermore, from the surface, there did not seem to be anything special. However, since the system had said that this was a mysterious area, then there must be something special about it. Yixian circled the lake but did not find anything special. Yixian frowned slightly. What was so strange about this that the system would say that this was a mysterious area? With a wave of his hand, Yixian prepared to retrieve some of the lake water to examine it carefully. However, this time, he finally found something special. Yixian could not retrieve the lake water at all. Chapter 2289. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. However, there was not a single drop of water in the lake. What was going on? Yixian frowned slightly. There was something strange about this lake water. Ding! System notification. Congratulations to the host for discovering the blood of an ancient demon. It is recommended that the host collect it immediately. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. Wait a minute. System, you said that this lake's water is the blood of some ancient demon god? Yixian's heart was filled with astonishment. Such a large lake, if it really was the blood of an ancient demon god, then how huge would that ancient demon god be? Ding. System notification. The blood of an ancient demon can be used to strengthen the host's bloodline or special bloodline. The key is, how do I collect it? Yes, Yixian could not think of a good way to collect the blood of an ancient demon. Yixian had tried it with his magic treasure earlier. Any magic treasure that entered the lake water would quickly lose its divine power. After leaving the lake water, it would slowly recover its divine power. In other words, this lake water had the effect of blocking out divine power. Devour. Yixian waved his hand and changed his method again. He was going to use the devouring space to absorb the lake water. At first, there was no reaction. But just as Yixian thought that he had failed, suddenly, a strong force came. It was the attractive force of the lake water. A force, a mysterious force, was actually interacting with Yixian's devouring force. At this time, even if Yixian wanted to withdraw his devouring space, he could not do so. System, what's going on? Yixian had never encountered such a situation before, so he immediately asked the system. Ding. System notification. The blood of an ancient demon has changed its attribute. Ding. System notification. Insufficient information, unable to determine the specific quality. Ding. System automatically strengthened devouring space. A series of notifications made Yixian unsure whether this was a blessing or a curse. From the system's notifications, Yixian understood that this lake water was not the blood of an ancient demon, but something of a higher level. But as for what it was, the system could not give an answer. Logically speaking, this was definitely a good thing for Yixian. After all, how could something of a higher level than the blood of an ancient demon be ordinary? But the prerequisite was that Yixian could subdue this thing. But the situation now was that Yixian and the lake water were in a stalemate. The two forces of the devouring space were in a stalemate in the devouring Yixian's devouring space. Or, it was devouring Yixian's devouring space. QWPM at this time the system's devouring space was the lake water, seemed that the lake water was also the devouring space. Even Yixian the translation, is translation, d*mnet, if this goes on, it won't work. Yixian panicked. If this continued, Yixian would be at a disadvantage. What should I do? I have to think of a way out. Wait a minute. This lake water seems to be able to devour divine power. If I attack now, will it divert a portion of its power to devour divine power? Suddenly, Yixian had a flash of inspiration as he thought of a possibility. Although Yixian couldn't move right now, Wei Zhentian and the others could move. Thinking of this possibility, Yixian did not hesitate in the slightest. 1,000 beast sword servants. Flower god sword servants. Come out, all of you. The two great sword servants appeared in an instant. As soon as they appeared, Yixian immediately gave the order. All god-class mounts and flower gods, jump into the lake. Upon receiving the order, all the god-class mounts and flower gods jumped into the lake without hesitation. Splat! Splat! Yixian could clearly see that the moment they entered the water, both the god-class mounts and the flower gods were immediately melted and devoured. However, Yixian did not hesitate. He could not hesitate. Wei Zhentian, control the Godslayer and attack. Yixian gave the order to Wei Zhentian again. With a whoosh, the Godslayer flew past Yixian. Then it launched attack after attack from mid-air. Boom! 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 However, the lake water did not stir up the slightest ripple. All the god-class mounts, flower gods, and Godslayer's attacks could not even cause a ripple in the lake water. What a terrifying lake water! No, it should be said that it was a terrifying elite. After all, this was the blood of an elite, not real lake water. Just what kind of expert was this? His blood was actually able to maintain such a strong power even after so long. Fortunately, Yixian's series of actions were effective. At this point, the devouring power of the lake water had decreased significantly. In this way, Yixian's side would gain the advantage. Quick, system devour. Then quickly escape. Yes, Yixian would not miss such a good opportunity. Of course, it was impossible to completely devour the lake water. However, Yixian believed that even a little bit would be useful. However, even if he sacrificed all of his divine rank mounts and the 100 flower goddess, at the same time, Wei Zhentian controlled the god-slaying sword to madly attack. However, he only managed to buy a little bit of time for Yixian. In that little bit of time, Yixian did not even manage to devour a bucket of the lake water. After that, Yixian broke away from the devouring power and stood by the lake, bewildered. When Yixian looked at the lake water again, he could not help but shudder. Fortunately, he managed to obtain a bucket in the end. Moreover, as long as Yixian was willing, he could wait for his mounts to level up and the flower gods to respawn. Yixian knew that good things like this were hard to come by. As such, Yixian did not even consider leaving. Instead, he continued to collect the lake water. Yixian was very patient. As time passed and he mastered the technique, Yixian could already devour 2 buckets of the lake water at once. All of the lake water was stored in Yixian's devouring space. Initially, Yixian had only intended to store more of it since it was a good thing. After all, this strange place was not a place where Yixian could enter at will. However, when he had stored up to 100 buckets, the system's notification sounded. Ding! System notification. Host can now condense the lake water. Do you wish to condense it? Condense the lake water? What was the use of that? However, since the system had said so, there must be a use for condensing it. All right, condense it, Yixian said to the system. Chapter 2290. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The lake became smaller and smaller at a speed visible to the naked eye. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD 1 day. This process continued for an entire day. When the lake was finally condensed, Xian was shocked. It was actually a drop of purple blood. Yes, after using so much lake water, he only managed to condense a drop of purple blood. Of course, even so, the blood contained in the lake was extremely terrifying. System, what is this? Ding. System notification. Host's current level is not high enough to view. Ding. System notification. Unknown blood. Usage unknown. Host is advised to store it. After spending so much time and energy, all he got was a drop of blood that he didn't even know what it was used for? Should he continue to collect it? Xian was hesitant. Xian didn't know what this thing was for at the moment. It was so difficult to collect it. If he continued to collect it, wouldn't it be a waste of time? However, Xian was certain that this blood was not simple. This was indeed a dilemma. Forget it. I'll just collect 9 more drops. I'll get a total of 10 drops of purple blood. Then, I'll leave. Regardless of whether I can find out what this blood is for in the future, at least I won't have any regrets. Xian made his decision. This collection took an entire year and a half. As Xian became more proficient in collecting the blood, his timing also improved. However, it still took him a year and a half to collect 10 drops of purple blood. In this past year and a half, perhaps it was because Xian was by the lake, but he didn't receive any threats from divine beasts. Of course, in this past year and a half, it was impossible for Xian to say that he'd improved at all. QWPM other than the 10 drops of purple blood. He didn't get anything else. It's time to leave. After staying here for so long, it was time to leave. There was no point in continuing to stay here. However, how to leave was another problem. There were many high-level divine beasts in the surroundings. It could be said that Xian would be safe if he stayed by the lake, but if he left, those divine beasts would immediately attack him. However, even if that was the case, Xian could not say that he would stay here forever. Sword Attendant Wan Sun. Go and detect where the divine beast is the weakest. Xian ordered Sword Attendant Wan Sun. After a round of investigation, Sword Attendant Wan Xuan finally found the weakest divine beast. In that case, there was no doubt that Xian could only break through from the direction of this divine beast. Xian's figure moved as he directly charged forward. Very quickly, he arrived at the so-called weakest divine beast that the myriad search sword attendant had detected. Ding. System notification. Target has been set. 4th rank middle-level divine lord. A level 5 middle-class divine lord. Was there even a need to fight? Xian did not have the slightest confidence. After all, he was only a 1st rank upper-level true god. He was 2 whole realms away from a 5th rank middle-level divine lord. The gap was too big. However, did Xian have a choice? Since there was no other choice, he could only fight to the death. If he really couldn't win, Xian could only retreat to the lake and wait for the wings of the gods to recover. After all, there was no other way. System, what kind of divine beast is this? At this moment, Xian was looking at the divine beast from afar. His heart was full of doubts. This divine beast was a type that he had never seen before. Furthermore, Xian could feel that the divine beast was also looking at him. However, the divine beast did not make any unnecessary movements. He didn't know what it wanted to do. The divine beast in front of Xian looked very similar to a lion. However, it had 3 tails and a single horn on its forehead. The most unique feature was its 2 nostrils. One of its nostrils was constantly spewing out flames, while the other was spewing out frost. Flames and frost coexisted in the divine beast's body. This was considered a rare sight. Ding. System notification. Target has been set. Fire Frost Lion. Ding. Fire Frost Lion has the special ability to control both fire and frost. It can control both fire and frost attacks. Ding. Fire Frost Lion has the special ability, Frost Fire Domain. Xian frowned slightly. Domain. This time, he had finally encountered a divine beast with a true domain. If he wanted to defeat such a powerful existence, Xian could not be reckless. Therefore, he had to make sufficient preparations. While the Fire Frost Lion was ignoring him, Xian began to set up restrictions. At the same time, he had to refine a large number of divine talismans. When he was collecting the purple blood, Yi Xian did not use up too many resources. Therefore, he could still set up some restrictions. However, this time, Yi Xian was preparing to refine a special restriction. A special restriction that combined divine talismans to attack. It could be said that Yi Xian had never set up such a restriction before. However, in order to deal with the Fire Frost Lion, he had no choice but to do so. Refining such a special restriction required a large amount of time. Yi Xian understood that if the Fire Frost Lion attacked Yi Xian before Yi Xian finished refining the restriction, then Yi Xian would not have a chance to successfully refine the restriction. However, if Yi Xian retreated to set up the restriction, the attack range of the restriction would not be so wide. Therefore, he could only choose to refine the restriction here. Yi Xian moved quickly. However, it was not easy to refine the restriction. Fortunately, for some reason, the Fire Frost Lion did not leave its original position. It did not take the initiative to attack Yi Xian. This gave Yi Xian plenty of time. Ding! System notice. Congratulations to the host. You have successfully refined the Divine Phantom Talisman restriction. Yi Xian looked at his masterpiece and was very satisfied. The Dark Illusion Divine Talisman was made from 99 Darkness Divine Talismans and 99 Illusion Divine Talismans. Once it was activated, it would produce a continuous attack. Moreover, the core of the Divine Phantom Talisman restriction was not the Divine Talisman, but the restriction itself. When activated, this restriction would form a unique restriction half territory. Although it was only a half territory, its power was not to be underestimated. This was the first time Yi Xian had used such a special restriction that combined divine talismans and restrictions. The power of this restriction would only be known through actual combat. Alright then, let's have a decisive battle. Yi Xian knew that his opponent this time was an unprecedented challenge. He was not afraid, but he had to be cautious. Thousand Beasts Sword Attendant. Chapter 2291. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation. The Fiery Frost Lion was truly powerful. The Thousand Beast Sword Servant led 1,000 divine beast mounts into the fray. The divine beast mounts could summon a minimum of gold beasts, and they could even summon 100 platinum beasts and a few purple gold beasts. 135, 7924? 6810 GGGGGD. However, even such a powerful force was nothing in front of the Fiery Frost Lion. The Fiery Frost Lion moved, and with a wave of its claws, a wave of frost gushed out. The frost was extremely cold, and its attack range was extremely large. Many divine beast mounts were instantly killed, and some were even frozen. However, this was not the greatest threat. The greatest threat was the Fiery Frost Lion's next attack. The Fiery Frost Lion opened its mouth and roared. Following its roar was a powerful wall of fire. QWPM. The wall of fire pushed forward, and in an instant, hundreds of divine beast mounts were trapped by the frost and burned to death. The Thousand Beast Sword Servant did not retreat. Instead, it ordered the divine beast mounts to continue charging. Thousand Beasts Feast. Yi Xian immediately activated the Thousand Beasts Feast to further strengthen the divine beast mounts. The divine beast mounts were not weak either. Although they were facing a divine lord-ranked divine beast, this did not mean that they did not have the ability to fight back. A few of the divine beast mounts turned into streaks of light and charged towards the Fiery Frost Lion. Boom! Boom! They did not use any offensive techniques, only the simplest of charging. After all, Yi Xian's order to the Thousand Beast Sword Servant was not to kill, but to lure the enemy. Yi Xian did not expect to rely on the divine beast mounts to kill the divine beast in front of him. After a few more frenzied collisions, although they did not cause much damage to the Fiery Frost Lion, they successfully enraged it. The Fiery Frost Lion roared loudly and pounced towards the divine beast mounts. The Thousand Beast Sword Servant naturally retreated as it fought. One by one, the divine beast mounts continued to charge forward, even though it was basically suicide. Step by step, they lured the Fiery Frost Lion towards the restrictions set up by Yi Xian. This Fire Frost Lion was incomparably powerful. At the same time, its intelligence wasn't low either. He knew that Yi Xian had set up a trap in front of him. However, Yi Xian's cultivation level was so low that even though the Fire Frost Lion knew that there was danger ahead, it didn't care at all. Roar! The Fire Frost Lion roared and sped up. With a single charge, he sent dozens of divine grade mounts flying, or even directly killed them. However, with this dash, he had already rushed into Yi Xian's restriction. Seal. Open. Yi Xian roared. In an instant, the environment around the Fire Frost Lion changed. The most important part of the Dark Illusion Talisman was the word dark and the word illusion. At this moment, the effect of the half-restriction was activated. The Fire Frost Lion was instantly trapped within the half-restriction of the Dark Illusion Divine Talisman. Yi Xian, who was standing outside, could clearly see the Fire Frost Lion trying to escape. However, this was a half-restriction. It wasn't going to be that easy to escape. The 99 Darkness Divine Talismans were constantly changing. No matter where the Fire Frost Lion tried to go, it would be transported to the center by the power of the 9 Darkness Divine Talisman. The power of the 99 Illusion Divine Talismans had also been activated. Illusory figures appeared one after another. These figures were formed by the divine power of the Illusion Divine Talisman. These figures kept charging at the Fire Frost Lion. If the Fire Frost Lion ignored them, they would continue to attack. However, if the Fire Frost Lion tried to kill them, they would immediately self-detonate. Most importantly, there seemed to be no end to these figures. They were condensing at every moment. Once they were condensed, they would charge at the Fire Frost Lion without hesitation. The self-detonation of these figures could hurt the Fire Frost Lion, but it wouldn't hurt the other figures. Instead, it would strengthen the other figures. If the Fire Frost Lion didn't fight back, it would only be able to passively take the beating. However, the result of fighting back was that the figures would become stronger and stronger. Even Yi Xian was shocked. This method was simply unimaginable. Although the Illusion Divine Talisman was only a half-restriction, it wasn't a real restriction. However, it could still gather the surrounding divine power. Therefore, around the restriction, divine power was constantly being drawn into the formation. Weren't the figures condensed from the divine power coming from outside? However, once the divine power entered, it wouldn't leak out from inside the restriction. Therefore, the overall divine power in the restriction was constantly strengthening. Even if the figures were killed by the Fire Frost Lion, the overall divine power was still there. Within the restriction, the divine power would only become stronger. Those figures were just condensed from the divine power. Yi Xian stood quietly to the side, watching the Fire Frost Lion struggle. Yi Xian was waiting for the best opportunity. It could be said that this time, Yi Xian had to choose the right time to strike. Moreover, he had to rely on a critical hit to kill the Fire Frost Lion. The difference in level was too great. This was already the strongest opponent Yi Xian had ever faced. Ding! System notification. Detected special blood in the target's body. Ding! System notification. Congratulations to the host for discovering the only hidden mission, Purple Blood Saint. Ding! System notification. This mission requires the host to kill all the divine beasts here. Ding! System notification. Since the host discovered this mission early, the system will compensate the host with a permanent teleportation. Ding! Teleportation activated successfully. The host can now freely teleport between the Kunlun realm and the mysterious lake. Host, please note that teleportation is not allowed during battle. The series of system notifications made Yi Xian confused. What was going on? Was the system giving him benefits? Ding! System notification. The humanization level of the system has reached the highest level. From now on, it can no longer be improved. After waiting for a long time, the system suddenly gave another notification. However, this time, Yi Xian understood why there was such a good thing as giving benefits. However, Yi Xian still felt that the system was not humanized enough. Of course, compared to before, it was much better. Yi Xian was still quite satisfied. Yi Xian smiled as he looked at the trapped Fire Frost Lion in front of him. However, he was no longer worried. No matter how high the cultivation level of the monster here was, it was still his prey. Moreover, it was the kind of prey that he could kill at any time. He did not know what kind of benefits he would get after completing the mission of Purple Blood Saint. Suddenly, the Fire Frost Lion let out a loud roar. Then, with the Fire Frost Lion as the center, a territory appeared in an instant. In the Overgod realm, the greatest symbol was the territory. A territory represented the ability to borrow the power of the precepts to create their own world. Chapter 2292. Translator, Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation within Yi Xian's Phantom Talisman Restriction. A strange domain that was half as red as fire and half as blue as ice appeared. 1357924 6810 GGGGGD. As for the phantoms, once they entered the domain, they would either be destroyed by the flames or frozen by the frost. Outside the blazing lion's domain, phantoms were constantly being destroyed and turned into divine power. For a moment, it was a stalemate. Logically speaking, in such a situation, Yi Xian should be worried. After all, the blazing frost lion's goal was obvious. It was to destroy Yi Xian's restriction from the inside. However, the result was the opposite. At this moment, Yi Xian's eyes lit up and he rushed out. Good chance, haha, Wei Zhentian, let's go. What was Yi Xian trying to do? Wasn't he courting death by barging into the blazing frost lion's restriction? What the blazing lion released was a real restriction. It was not something Yi Xian could withstand. What was he trying to do? Die for me. With a whoosh, Yi Xian threw the Godslayer with all his might. Yi Xian was using the Godslayer as a throwing knife? Using Yi Xian's strength, Wei Zhentian controlled the Godslayer at full speed and charged at the blazing lion. It turned out that the blazing lion was at his weakest when he released his domain. This was because when the divine power in his body suddenly erupted, his body would naturally be weaker. After all, the blazing lion was only a mid-level divine lord. He had only just mastered the power of a domain. The power of fire roasted the Godslayer while the power of frost slowed down the Godslayer. However, combined with Yi Xian and Wei Zhentian's strength, the Godslayer's speed had already exceeded its limit. Puchi! The sword pierced through. Under the tenfold critical strike, the Godslayer left a huge gash on the blazing frost lion's body. Then, without stopping, the Godslayer charged out of the domain. Roar! The fire frost lion let out an earth-shattering roar, perhaps because of the pain, or perhaps because of its unwillingness. That powerful roar contained boundless power. In an instant, countless mountains crumbled, and countless ancient trees were uprooted. Even Yi Xian was blown away by this force and almost lost his footing. Go to hell! Yi Xian forcibly resisted the powerful force and barged into the fire frost lion's domain. Countless phantoms followed Yi Xian as he charged forward. Due to the power of the fire frost lion's domain, they were quickly wiped out. However, it created a protective barrier for Yi Xian. Bang! Pang pang pang! One by one, the divine talismans exploded, releasing a large amount of divine power and illusions. Yi Xian was staking everything on a single throw. Success or failure, it all depended on this time. The dark illusion talisman restriction that Yi Xian had spent so much effort to set up was rapidly crumbling. However, the countless phantoms were also opening a path for him to reach the mythical beast. The Firefrost Lion's restriction could not suppress Yi Xian's phantoms. This was because Yi Xian was using explosive power to resist the Firefrost Lion's normal power. With a whoosh, the Godslayer returned to Yi Xian's hands under Wei Zhentian's control. At this moment, Yi Xian was less than 100 meters away from the Firefrost Lion. 100 meters in the blink of an eye. Die! Yi Xian suddenly swung the Godslayer. 7 streaks of sword light surged towards the Firefrost Lion like a wave. Boom! 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 Tenfold critical strike. Tenfold critical strike. One hit, one kill. Haha! Yi Xian could not help but laugh out loud. He had lost his composure this time, but this victory was worth laughing out loud. Yi Xian had planned for so long and fought for so long just for this final strike. Furthermore, he had to rely on the critical strike. However, he had made the right bet this time. Therefore, he had profited greatly this time. Devour! Yi Xian waved his hand and the Firefrost Lion's corpse was directly devoured by him. Ding! Host has broken through. Current level is 3rd grade superior true immortal. 3rd grade superior true immortal. Yi Xian frowned slightly. This upgrade was not considered small, but this time, the target he had killed was also a mid-level divine lord. Ding! System notification. Host has obtained Fire Law and Frost Law fragments. Ding! When the number of law fragments reaches a certain number, the host can directly use the power of the laws. Ding! Different laws require different amounts of fragments. Furthermore, the quality of the laws is also different. Ding! System notification. Host has killed the Firefrost Lion and obtained 1 drop of golden blood. Ah! Golden blood? Yi Xian had obtained the purple blood from the mysterious lake. Of course, he did not know what use it had. However, now that he had obtained the golden blood, what use did it have? System, what use does this golden blood have? Ding. System notification. Host's level is insufficient. Unable to view. Alright, it was the same as the purple blood. He did not know what use it had. However, there was one thing that Yi Xian could be sure of. This thing was definitely useful. Furthermore, it was a rare good thing. At this time, Yi Xian had already used up all the resources he had. After all, it was a semi-domain level restriction. How could it be so simple? It could be set up immediately. Without resources it was impossible. Therefore, Yi Xian could not continue to explore this place. It was clearly a simple mission, but he did not expect to trigger a hidden mission. He did not know if this was Yi Xian's luck or if he did not believe it. System, activate the positioning transmission. I want to return to the Kunlun realm. Ding! Transmission activated. Transmission successful. When he came here, Yi Xian had spent a long time on the journey. When the positioning transmission was activated, it happened in the blink of an eye. Yi Xian could not help but want to obtain such an ability. Unfortunately, this was a reward from the system. Of course, the wings of the gods could also do it, but the energy would not allow it. This time, Yi Xian did not turn in the mission. He chose to give up. This was because if he told the Kunlun realm about the situation there would be a large number of disciples rushing over. Then, Yi Xian's exclusive hunting ground would be gone. Of course, this meant that Yi Xian could only look for a new mission. However, he was not in a hurry. This time, he was prepared to try another challenge. Ranking battles? Wasn't it just challenging others? Yi Xian wanted to get on the ranking list. Of course, even though it was said that everyone was on the ranking list, there were still some differences between them. The top 1,000 were called the Kunlun ranking. Everyone who was on the ranking list was a famous genius. The top 1,000 to 10,000 were called the Kunlun ranking, which was not bad. As for those who were not on the top 10,000, no one would care. The Kunlun realm was where all the geniuses of the Kunlun realm gathered. At this time, Yi Xian had not even entered the Kunlun ranking, let alone the Kunlun ranking. This time, Yi Xian was going to challenge the last person on the Kunlun ranking, the 10,000th. Chapter 2293. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation, have you heard? There's a newcomer who challenged an expert on the Lewin list. Is there something wrong with that guy's head? Keep your voice down. Don't spout nonsense. Let me tell you, that guy is incredible. I heard that the Divine Master favors him, and he has a special relationship with the princess. Oh, so he's just a freeloader. What's there to worry about? 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. Shut up. Do you know who he is? Let me tell you, he's a specially recruited expert. Do you know what a specially recruited expert is? Every specially recruited expert in the Kunlun realm is a peerless genius. Back then, when he participated in the assessment battle, a mere true immortal realm guy actually used domain power. Yes, I heard about it too. That Yi Xian is incredible. It's one thing for him to have an incomparable cultivation talent, but this guy is not only a cultivation genius, but also a divine talisman grandmaster, restriction grandmaster, and alchemy grandmaster. Are you talking about a human? How can anyone be so powerful? Even if it's just a secondary profession, it's impossible to reach the grandmaster level without a lot of resources and extraordinary talent. You're saying that Yi Xian has 3 grandmasters, and his cultivation talent is incredible. I don't believe it. When the news of Yi Xian challenging the Lewin list spread, the entire Kunlun realm was in an uproar. Because of Yi Xian's 3 grandmasters and his relationship with the princess, he wasn't a nobody in the Kunlun realm. But now, he had just joined the Kunlun realm. Yet he had already challenged the Lewin ranking. This caused countless people to be extremely surprised. Some did not believe Yi Xian, while others believed that Yi Xian could do it. In fact, there were even people who started gambling. QWPM, they were betting on whether Yi Xian could win. What's more, these people did not even discuss Yi Xian's opponent. It was as if Yi Xian was the main character, and the Lewin list expert was his supporting character. In a pavilion in the Kunlun realm, Wan Tianyu waved his hand angrily. Instantly, an expensive tea table made of special materials turned into powder. In front of him were his 3 good friends. Tianyu, don't mind him so much. This Yi Xian is just a young brat. Newborn calves aren't afraid of tigers. He actually dares to challenge you. I think he's just courting death. Hee, not to the extent of death. If we really kill him, I'm afraid there will be trouble. However, Tianyu, this time, we have to teach that guy a lesson. A mere true God realm guy actually came to challenge the Luan list instead of cultivating properly. Humph, why doesn't he think about it? Only overgods can enter the Luan rankings. What makes him think he can? The few of them kept consoling Wan Tianyu, but it didn't seem to have any effect. Wan Tianyu was Yi Xian's opponent, and his cultivation had attained the low rank of the 6th rank of the domain Enlightened Spirit God realm. Even though he hadn't ascended the Luan rankings for long, he tried over 10 times before he succeeded. Moreover, he possessed a special divine ability. It was just that he did not expect that a mere true God realm actually dared to challenge him. Wan Tianyu had already decided in his heart that he would definitely give Yi Xian an unforgettable lesson. Yi Xian really did not expect that his first challenge would actually become a grand occasion in the Kunlun territory. There was naturally an arena space in the Kunlun territory, and at this moment, there were no empty seats around the arena space. It should be known that the spectator seats around the arena space in the Kunlun territory were specially constructed. To put it simply, the arena space was the center point, and then countless seats were distributed in a circle around it. There were a total of 100,000 seats here. In other words, a total of 100,000 people had come to watch Yi Xian's first challenge match. Normally, even if it was a challenge for the Luan rankings, it would be considered good if there were a few thousand people. Who would have thought that the battle for the last place on the Luan rankings would attract 100,000 people? Of course, there were probably not many people who actually came to watch Yi Xian's match. At this moment, Miyu was saying some words of encouragement to Yi Xian in the spectator seats. As for Kuan Buyu, he was watching calmly from the side. I say, Yi Xian, you really won't feel at ease if you don't stir up some trouble, right? You actually went to challenge the Luan rankings so quickly. Good, you're good. Kuan Buyu looked at Yi Xian, his eyes filled with mockery. He clearly did not think that Yi Xian could win. Of course, there were probably not many people who thought that Yi Xian could win now. Just look at the betting odds. Those who bet on Yi Xian's victory were 1 to 1,000. His opponent's odds were 1 to 1,000. This difference was enough to prove everything. Yi Xian smiled and did not say anything. No matter how others saw it, Yi Xian knew what he wanted, and that was enough. In fact, Yi Xian had already bet everything he had on himself to win. After the last battle, Yi Xian could be said to be quite poor. Even if Yi Xian took out all the resources he could as collateral, he could only exchange for 3 million divine crystals. In addition to Yi Xian's 700,000 divine crystals from the realm of the gods, Yi Xian bet a total of 3 million divine crystals on himself to win. Yi Xian had previously ransacked Mo Shangji's treasury and the Lin family's treasury. Unfortunately, even with so many resources, it was not enough for Yi Xian to use. Just the last time he set up the restriction of the divine phantom talisman in that half of the domain had already used up most of Yi Xian's resources. Moreover, Yi Xian had previously left most of his resources to Fian and the others. Yi Xian slowly walked into the arena. At this moment, Wan Tianyu was already waiting inside. Yi Xian versus Wan Tianyu, the challenge officially begins. Following the announcement of a Kunlun elder, the challenge officially began. You're Yi Xian? Humph, kid, you've got guts. Wan Tianyu looked at Yi Xian. Although his heart was filled with anger, there was a mocking smile on his face. Senior brother, please enlighten me. Yi Xian also looked at Wan Tianyu, but there was neither sadness nor joy on his face. Good boy, you're pretending to be profound, right? You're trying to attract the attention of the princess, right? Haha, then I'll let the princess remember your ugly face today. Because I'll beat you until your parents won't recognize you. Wind fist, lightning fist. Wan Tianyu attacked as soon as he said he would. His first move was a killing move. The arena was guarded by elders. Although it was not enough to take Yi Xian's life, if this attack hit, then Yi Xian would not have it easy either. Wow, Wan Tianyu actually used his best ability right off the bat. Looks like he was angered by that Yi Xian brat. Discussions broke out in the spectator stands. However, the next scene made them all shut their mouths. Yi Xian did not even move, just casually waving his hand, and an energy wall directly blocked in front of Wan Tianyu. Wan Tianyu's attack was actually so easily blocked by Yi Xian. Chapter 2294. Rain Dance, Thunderous Chain Punch. In an instant, Wan Tianyu's hands seemed to have turned into thousands of copies. In an instant, the shadows of his fists were everywhere in front of Yi Xian. 135, 7924? 6810 GGGGGD. This Wan Tianyu walked the path of body cultivation. Therefore, without mentioning anything else, his body's quality was extremely valiant. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth slightly curled up as he lightly said, "This time, there's finally something to see." Then, with a wave of his hand, 5 divine talismans appeared in front of him. One of them was activated immediately. That divine talisman exploded in mid-air. In an instant, countless icicles appeared in front of Yi Xian. These icicles were extremely sharp and hard. They were made of 10,000-year ice. Once the icicles appeared, they immediately attacked Wan Tianyu. The arena of the Kunluan realm didn't have a physical body. It was just an empty space. Hence, Yi Xian and Wan Tianyu both stood proudly in the empty space. However, as the two of them continued to attack each other, a clear dividing line appeared in the space of the arena. Yi Xian's icicles and Wan Tianyu's fists clashed. Due to the continuous explosions, the space was split into 2 halves. Continuous sounds of explosions resounded throughout the entire arena. "Humph, kid, is this all you've got? Haha, how dare you challenge me with this little bit of skill? You're overestimating yourself." Wan Tianyu looked at Yi Xian with disdain. On the surface, Yi Xian seemed to be on par with him. However, in Wan Tianyu's heart, Yi Xian was just a guy who didn't know his own limits. Yi Xian frowned slightly. In fact, because this was his first challenge, Yi Xian still had some respect for his opponent. He even addressed him as senior brother. However, if he didn't want to give him face, then why should he give him face? "What did you just say?" Yi Xian's aura suddenly changed as he spoke directly to Wan Tianyu. At this moment, Wan Tianyu still didn't know that he had unintentionally angered Yi Xian. He was still clamoring, "Kid, you're just a mere true god ant. How dare you waste my time? Today, I'll show you who's boss." "Show me who's boss?" "Very well." Yi Xian attacked. This time, he took the initiative. 1,000 beast sword servants. Flower god sword servants. Kill him. All of a sudden, thousands of divine beasts appeared in the arena. As soon as these divine beasts appeared, they immediately charged towards Wan Tianyu. But was this the end? This was just the beginning. Talisman. Explode. Following Yi Xian's words, 4 divine talismans exploded at the same time. A fire dragon, a giant sword, a divine talisman warrior holding a spear, and countless bolts of lightning attacked Wan Tianyu at the same time. This wasn't the end of it. Yi Xian had already taken out the god-slaying sword and charged out. QWPM, boom. 1 slash. Yes, just 1 slash. However, the entire arena space and the entire spectator stands were silent. Yi Xian's slash had knocked Wan Tianyu unconscious. He was knocked unconscious. Not killed. Both were attacks, but killing was much easier than knocking someone unconscious. To kill, one only needed to use all one's strength. However, stun was not the same. Stun required a very good grip. It required precise control of one's strength. As long as one understood the opponent's limit and controlled one's own strength, one could do it. If it was Wan Tianyu who knocked out Yi Xian with a single strike, he might not have such a big reaction. However, the current situation was that Yi Xian sent Wan Tianyu flying with a single strike, causing him to directly faint. Such a huge contrast was unimaginable even in the dreams of many. A portion of the audience, who had been waiting to see Yi Xian make a fool of himself, were stunned. And those who were stunned for a moment, then burst into thunderous applause. No way, how can this guy be so strong? He can knock Wan Tianyu unconscious with a single slash. Yeah, Wan Tianyu is a divine lord, and Yi Xian is just a true god. How is this possible? Did I see wrongly? At this moment, The audience couldn't react. Clearly, Yi Xian and Wan Tianyu had just started fighting. And then it ended just like that? One move. Just one move. Yi Xian had defeated Wan Tianyu? Countless people were filled with doubts. Now, whether it was those on the rankings or those not on the rankings, they were all dumbfounded. Such a situation was beyond their expectations. Even those who thought that Yi Xian might win felt that it would be a difficult battle. But the result was Yi Xian defeating Wan Tianyu in one move. That elder couldn't react for a long time. After a long time, he finally reacted and announced loudly. Yi Xian challenged Wan Tianyu, and Yi Xian won. Yi Xian replaced Wan Tianyu and took the 10,000th place on the Luan roll. What was this called? Some of the spectators weren't even ready to watch the battle, but the battle was already over. Suddenly, a voice wailed in anguish. Ah, my divine crystals! My divine crystals! I've lost badly this time. Many of the people who had bet on Yi Xian's loss were already regretting it. Some people even suspected that Wan Tianyu had deliberately pretended to lose in order to cheat every one of their divine crystals. Of course, they knew that this was impossible. However, Yi Xian defeating Wan Tianyu in one move was really beyond their expectations, so they could only think that way. After all, no one believed that Yi Xian had such strength. Of course, Yi Xian didn't care at all. Instead, he went straight to the betting area. When he saw Yi Xian, the person who had set up the betting area had a change in expression. Yi Xian had only bet 3 million. How much was 1,000 times 3 million? It could be said that he couldn't afford it at all. Here are all my resources. They are worth about 10 billion divine crystals. Yi Xian, this is all I have. I will return the rest to you in the future. What do you think? Yi Xian couldn't be bothered with this person. To Yi Xian, these resources could only be taken for granted. He didn't care at all. Yi Xian ignored that person's expression. He took the interspatial ring and turned to leave. However, Yi Xian didn't notice that person's sinister gaze. Since he dared to set up a betting area in the Kunlun region, how could he do it if he didn't have some strength? 30 billion divine crystals might not be a small amount, but that was only for people like Yi Xian. In fact, to the big factions, a few billion divine crystals were just for fun. Divine crystals were just the smallest currency unit in the realm of the gods. It was only because it could be used to directly absorb divine power that everyone had been using it for a long time. In fact, there were other currency units above divine crystals, such as astral spirits. Chapter 2295. The exchange rate for Spirit of the Stars was 100 million Spirit of the Stars. Yi Xian didn't know this yet. 1357924 6810 GGGGGD. It was still the same sentence. Only when Yi Xian had sufficient strength would he be able to know more. The realm of the gods was huge, and there were many rules within it. There were some rules that couldn't be considered rules, and it was difficult to know without the corresponding strength. Yi Xian had obtained 10 billion Spirit of the Stars, so he naturally had to exchange them for resources. Although he only had about 1 billion Spirit of the Stars in his universe ring, the rest were ordinary resources. But now, Yi Xian needed a large amount of Spirit of the Stars to create seals, talismans, and pills. There was an auction in the Kunlun realm. It was set up by the disciples of the Kunlun realm. It didn't have a name, but the disciples of the Kunlun realm were used to calling it the market. In the market, everyone could buy whatever they wanted. Moreover, they were in the Kunlun realm, so they didn't have to worry about robberies or the like. Yi Xian casually walked around and exchanged the ordinary resources and Spirit of the Stars he didn't need for the special resources he needed. Then, he prepared to set off again. However, what Yi Xian didn't expect was that before he could leave, he received a sound transmission. Someone wanted to challenge him. That's right. In the hearts of many people, Yi Xian's victory over Wan Tianyu was rather strange. Now that Yi Xian was last on the Kun rankings, it was inevitable that some people would think that this was a good opportunity. Yi Xian smirked. Did these people really think that this was a good opportunity? Yi Xian didn't want to waste too much time because of a challenge. So this time, he wanted to deal with all the unnecessary troubles in one go. According to the rules of the challenge, Yi Xian could rest for a month. During this month, he had the right to reject any challenge. Moreover, even if he accepted, he had 10 days to prepare. However, Yi Xian did not care about that at all. Instead, he directly replied, "Tomorrow is tomorrow. Yi Xian will accept the challenge." The next morning, the spectator area of the dueling ring space was packed to the brim once more. Perhaps the first time, most of the spectators were here for Miyu instead of Yi Xian. But today, many people were here for Yi Xian. This was because until now, no one believed that Yi Xian had relied on his own strength to win the battle. Although no one said it clearly, there were rumors that Yi Xian had won because he had threatened Wan Tianyu and forced him to admit defeat. As for whether Yi Xian had the ability to do so, in their opinion there was. Because of Miyu, Yi Xian walked straight into the arena. His opponent had not arrived yet. Yi Xian did not say a word. He just stood there quietly. Soon, his opponent arrived. It was an extremely arrogant young master. With one look, it was obvious that he was a descendant of an aristocratic family like Kuan Buyu. The moment that guy entered the dueling ring space, he spoke to Yi Xian with disdain. "Brat, I'm not completely silent. That guy might be threatened by you, but I won't. Today, I want to see what you're capable of. Today, I'm going to teach you a lesson. I'll let you know that strength isn't something that can be obtained through trickery." "Are you done?" Yi Xian looked at that guy and asked calmly. "Humph, I'm done. So what? You want to admit defeat? It's too late. Today, I will beat the crap out of you." Yi Xian could not be bothered with that guy. Instead, he slowly unsheathed the Godslayer. Godslayer. Boom. One slash. Another slash. QWPM Yi Xian was defeated in one slash again. That brat who had been hooting a moment ago had actually fainted a moment later. Wah, how is this possible? Could that guy also be hired by Yi Xian to put on a show? Damn it, someone actually dared to play tricks in the Kunlun realm. They must be tired of living. The audience was in an uproar. Everyone was talking back and forth. In short, no one believed that Yi Xian had defeated his opponent with his own strength. In their eyes, Yi Xian had defeated his opponent using despicable means. However, at this moment, an unexpected scene occurred. Yi Xian stood proudly in the dueling ring space and roared loudly at everyone. "Who else? Who else is not convinced and wants to challenge me? Step forward this time. I want Yi Xian to accept today. I will give you a chance to challenge me." Humph! He had actually declared war on everyone. Was he trying to make the entire Kunlun realm his enemy? Who did he think he was? Who did he think he was? A mere newcomer like him dared to say such words. Was he trying to incite public outrage? Of course, those who were ranked higher than Yi Xian did not pay too much attention to it. In fact, although Yi Xian was exceptionally strong, the Kunlun realm was the Kunlun realm. However, this was the Kunlun realm after all, the place where the geniuses of the entire Kunlun divine domain gathered. Therefore, many people with higher cultivation realms than Yi Xian could see Yi Xian's true strength. They understood that Yi Xian's two battles were a true suppression of strength. However, while these people understood this principle, there were still many who did not. Especially those whose cultivation bases were lower than Yi Xian's, or only slightly higher than Yi Xian's, who could not see any clues. Who knew how many people dreamed of entering the Luan role. But now, a newcomer had actually entered the Luan role. Of course they were not convinced. "Good boy, Yi Xian. Today, I will teach you a lesson on behalf of everyone." A figure landed directly in the middle of the dueling ring space. The Kunlun realm elder pretended not to see it and ignored it. In his opinion, Zhuosu hoped that Yi Xian would use this opportunity to establish his prestige. Of course, it was also possible that he was displeased with Yi Xian, so he was waiting for someone to teach Yi Xian a lesson. It's Wu Xing. I heard that his cultivation is at the low 9th rank of the domain enlightened spirit god realm, and his strength is extremely formidable. Moreover, he's one of the 10 most likely candidates to enter the Luan role. His combat strength is extremely formidable. Isn't that so? I never expected that Wu Xing would actually step forward. Looks like Yi Xian has incurred public outrage. The spectators discussed animatedly. Meanwhile, in the dueling ring space, Wu Xing had already drawn his sword at Yi Xian. This fellow actually uses the sword as well. "I'm Wu Xing, low 9th rank of the domain enlightened spirit god realm. Kid, you're too arrogant, so I only have to teach you a lesson." "Is that so?" Yi Xian looked at that fellow, Yet he actually did not reveal the slightest emotion. He silently drew his Godslayer instead. Godslayer. Another swing of the sword. Another swing of the sword annihilated his opponent. Wu Xing merely had time to block it with his sword. However, the outcome was that his sword was destroyed, and he had already fainted. Chapter 2296. Could it be that there are only ants like this left? Are all those who want to challenge me ants like this? Yi Xian said disdainfully. Although he was speaking to Wu Xing, everyone present could hear him. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. At this point, most of the people were silent. 3 strikes. Just 3 strikes. Yi Xian had defeated 3 experts. The most important thing was that these 3 people weren't as unbearable as Yi Xian had said. At the very least, they were still people with a bit of fame. However, they had been defeated so miserably. Even Wu Xing's divine sword had been cut in half. Even his divine sword had been broken. Who would dare say that Wu Xing was fake? QWPM, was he also in cahoots with Yi Xian? One had to know that Wu Xing's divine sword was his most precious treasure. His ancestor had personally asked a master blacksmith to forge it for him. Is there anyone else who wants to fight? Step forward this time. Yi Xian once again shouted to the crowd in the spectator stands. However, this time, many people clearly didn't have the confidence to fight. In fact, wherever Yi Xian's gaze landed, many people didn't dare to meet Yi Xian's eyes. I'll do it. I'd like to see if you're really that strong, kid. A middle-aged man stepped forward. It's actually him. The spectators started to discuss again because the person who stepped forward this time could be said to be very famous. It was said that this person's aptitude wasn't very good, but the Kunlun territory still made an exception and accepted him. This was because this guy was a famous war maniac. This guy would never know how to write the word defeat. Some people said that he had a special bloodline, the Eternal Battle bloodline. This was a bloodline that wasn't too rare, but it was very special. People with this bloodline had a very strong will to fight. As long as they set their sights on a target, they wouldn't give up even if they failed 10,000 times. Of course, a better analogy would be to say that they were stubborn. Many people were unwilling to provoke people with this kind of bloodline. Once they treated you as an enemy, they would continuously challenge you until they defeated you. Legend had it that within the Kunlun god domain, there was once a family clan that had inherited this bloodline. However, it was precisely because of their stubbornness that led to the downfall of their clans. Now, there weren't many people left in the entire Kunlun god domain. Ding. System notification. A special bloodline that can be used to strengthen the Wanzun bloodline has been detected. It is recommended that the host sees it. System. This is the Kunlun realm. Do you really want me to fight a Kunlun realm expert alone and steal his bloodline? Doesn't that mean I have to kill him? Yi Xian was shocked by the system notification. Killing people in the Kunlun realm, this idea was really crazy. Ding. System notification. Host Wanzun's bloodline has a unique attribute. It can replicate and absorb the bloodline of others. Even if it doesn't harm their lives, it can still be done. Could the Wanzun bloodline be played like this? Since that was the case, then Yi Xian wouldn't hold back. That person jumped into the Lei Tai dimension, his face full of battle intent. His eyes were locked on Yi Xian, as if he was ready to fight at any moment. Yi Xian slowly drew out the Godslayer. This time, everyone's eyes widened, waiting to see how Yi Xian would defeat his opponent in one strike. However, just as they were filled with anticipation, they discovered that Yi Xian had actually casually put away the god-slaying sword. What was he doing? Was he going to admit defeat? Everyone was surprised that Yi Xian didn't draw his sword. However, no one saw that Yi Xian had already raised his hand. Wound. Suddenly, Yi Xian's voice rang out. Yi Xian immediately used the 6-syllable mantra. A mysterious power was activated in an instant. Although this person's cultivation base was higher than Yi Xian's, the power of the 6-syllable mantra would definitely be weaker. However, it wasn't completely useless. Following Yi Xian's words, that person suddenly felt his body stiffen, and a sense of helplessness exploded from his body. However, just as he was in shock, Yi Xian's fist came crashing down. Boom. One punch. This time, was he going to finish off his opponent with one punch? At this moment, Countless people were in disbelief. At the same time, everyone in the spectator stands had completely lost the ability to speak. Ding. System notification. Host has successfully strengthened the bloodline of Wan Zun. Ding. Host has successfully strengthened the bloodline of Wan Zun using the bloodline of eternal war. Host's battle intent has been strengthened. Hearing the system notification, Yi Xian nodded in satisfaction. After a moment, Yi Xian raised his head again and asked the countless spectators, "Is there anyone else who doesn't agree?" Silence. No one spoke. No one dared to doubt Yi Xian's strength anymore. Yi Xian had used his own strength to tell them that Yi Xian's strength wasn't just for show. Silence. A long silence. No one doubted Yi Xian's strength anymore. Even though Yi Xian was just a newcomer. One had to know that until now, Yi Xian hadn't used any techniques other than his first battle. Yi Xian was a restriction grandmaster, a divine talisman grandmaster, and an alchemy grandmaster. No matter who it was, everyone knew very well that the combat strength of any auxiliary profession was definitely not low. Otherwise, they wouldn't be so popular. In other words, Yi Xian hadn't used his full strength at all. Under the circumstances where he hadn't used his full strength, he was already able to defeat so many powerful people with one strike. Who would dare to doubt him? Yi Xian's strength had already silenced everyone. Although there were still many people who were extremely displeased with Yi Xian. However, either they weren't strong enough, or their ranking had surpassed Yi Xian's. According to the rules of the ranking challenge, those with a higher ranking couldn't casually challenge those with a lower ranking. Of course, if both parties were willing, they could also challenge each other. However, Yi Xian had already fought 3 times in a row. Now, no one would challenge Yi Xian. After all, in their hearts, challenging Yi Xian now would be taking advantage of the situation. Yi Xian stood in the arena and waited for a while. Still, no one came forward to challenge him. Yi Xian's lips curled up slightly as he walked out. Everyone watched Yi Xian silently. Yi Xian had used his own strength to prove what a true genius was. Moreover, just because of Yi Xian's challenge, he had actually gained admirers. However, Yi Xian wasn't aware of this at the moment because he had already left again. Now that Yi Xian had resources on hand, he naturally returned to the mysterious lake and prepared to hunt a divine beast. The divine beasts here were all at a very high level. They could help Yi Xian increase his level quickly. Of course, the prerequisite was that Yi Xian had enough resources to set up restrictions and divine talismans. Chapter 2297. This time, the seal that Yi Xian was going to create was not a half-territory seal, but its power was not to be underestimated. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD system. Let's begin. Create this so-called divine talisman seal. Seal divine talisman? Divine talisman seal? In fact, they were both a combination of seals and divine talismans. The only difference was that the primary and secondary effects were different. One used seals as the main attack method, and divine talismans as supplementary attacks. The other used divine talismans as the main attack method, and seals as talismans as the main attack method. This time, Yi Xian was going to create a seal called the Fallen Leaves Divine Talisman. Don't be fooled by the name of the seal. It didn't sound too threatening, and it sounded quite nice. However, its power was not to be underestimated. Countless resources disappeared from Yi Xian's hands. At the same time, divine talismans appeared in Yi Xian's hands. This time, Yi Xian used a total of 108 divine talismans. Among them, 8 divine talismans were the core of the seal, and the other 100 seals were the killing blow. The 108 divine talismans were quickly completed. Now, all that was left was the core of the seal. However, that thing could only be created after reaching the place, so Yi Xian could only call it a day. System. Send me to the mysterious lake. Ding! Activation of teleportation, successful. In the blink of an eye, Yi Xian arrived at the mysterious lake. Looking at the black water in the lake, Yi Xian knew that it was good stuff. However, Yi Xian was not going to collect it now. Since he could come here at any time, it was better to wait until his cultivation level was higher before collecting it. System. Detect the divine beasts around here and choose the weakest one. As Yi Xian had been here before and detected it, it was easier this time. All he needed was the system to locate the target. Ding. System notification. Location successful. Ding! Target set. Lower level 7 Divine Lord. 4-eared Divine Tiger. Lower level 7 Divine Lord? It seemed that his realm was not very high. In that case, Yi Xian wanted to meet this guy and see what was so special about him. When Yi Xian arrived at the 4-eared Divine Tiger's territory, he turned to the system and said, "System, detect the attributes of this 4-eared Divine Tiger." Ding! System notification. Detection successful. The 4-eared Divine Tiger had 2 pairs of special ears. One pair listened to the heavens, and the other to the earth. With the help of the 2 teams of special ears, the 4-eared Divine Tiger had the ability to predict the opponent's attack path, attack movements, and so on. Furthermore, the 4-eared Divine Tiger had mastered a special territory, the mountain hill. Yi Xian looked at the attributes of the 4-eared Divine Tiger and had a rough understanding of it. It could be said that on the surface, this 4-eared Divine Tiger was not as strong as the Firefrost Lion he had encountered previously. However, its ability to predict was a little tricky. Since he already had the information, there was no need for Yi Xian to waste any more time. He waved his hand. The 1,000 Beast Sword Servants and Blossom God Sword Servants appeared immediately. When they appeared, they did not hesitate at all. They charged towards the 4-eared Divine Tiger. Although the 4-eared Divine Tiger had the ability to predict, it could only be used when he activated it. How could the 4-eared Divine Tiger expect Yi Xian to suddenly appear and attack without rhyme or reason? "Human, you're courting death." A voice was transmitted directly into Yi Xian's ears. Yi Xian was slightly taken aback. This divine beast could actually speak through telepathy. It seemed that its intelligence was not low. At the very least, it would be harder to deal with than the Firefrost Lion. However, Yi Xian did not care so much. On one hand, he ordered the 1,000 Beast Sword Servants and Blossom God Sword Servants to attack the 4-eared Divine Tiger to buy time. On the other hand, Yi Xian had already spoken to the system. System, create the core of the talisman. The core of the talisman restriction was the talisman of the ancient tree. Without a tree, where would the leaves come from? Without leaves, how would the leaves fall? Therefore, the core of the restriction was the ancient tree. Furthermore, it was precisely because of this ancient tree that the falling leaves falling divine talisman was able to use the form of a restriction to unleash an attack from the divine talisman. As countless resources disappeared rapidly, a strange talisman appeared in Yi Xian's hand. The talisman was strange because of its appearance. The appearance of this divine talisman was actually a seed with strange patterns. Of course, Yi Xian was not in the mood to admire the beauty of the seed. Yi Xian threw the seed in front of Yi Xian. Rumble! In an instant, the seed broke through the ground and entered. Countless roots extended rapidly, continuously absorbing divine power from the ground. The branches and leaves grew rapidly as well. In an instant, it turned into a 100-meter-tall tree. And this was only because what Yi Xian refined was only the lowest level of the ancient tree core. One had to know that the ancient tree talisman was not only 100-meter tall, but also 1,000-meter, 10,000-meter tall one. However, Yi Xian did not have the ability to create such a powerful ancient tree core. At the same time, there was no need for him to do so. After that, Yi Xian threw the 8 core talismans into the ancient tree core. The 8 core divine talismans fused with the ancient tree. In an instant, the ancient tree seemed to have come alive. Moreover, it rapidly changed colors. The originally lush leaves of the ancient tree suddenly changed into various colors. These leaves of different colors actually represented different powers. After that, Yi Xian continued to throw talismans into the ancient tree. They fused into the ancient tree, either in the air or on the ground, completely changing the space around the ancient tree. The falling leaves talisman restriction was successfully created. At the same time, the 4-eared divine tiger had also defeated the 1,000 beast sword servants god tier mount, as well as the flower god sword servants flower god. Yi Xian, who had time to watch the 4-eared divine tiger fight, had to admit that this guy's fighting style was very strange. Be it god tier mounts or flower gods, their attacks were easily dodged by the 4-eared divine tiger, even if they were just practice attacks. This was because this guy had special senses. He could predict the opponent's attack trajectory in advance, so basically, ordinary attacks were useless against him. QWPM. Chapter 2298. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless fantasy translation. Their only choice was to fly up into the sky. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. More importantly, a huge mountain had appeared in the sky and was crashing down on the ground. The bottom of the mountain was reinforced by some special seal, making it exceptionally sturdy. The divine class mounts wanted to destroy the mountain from the bottom. But it was futile. No matter how the divine class mounts resisted, they could not do anything to the mountain. The size of the mountain was neither too big nor too small, and it just happened to fit the hill barrier. In other words, the divine class mounts that were surrounded did not even have a chance to fight back. They were crushed to death by the mountain. Is this the four-eared divine tiger special seal? The mountain hill is indeed an image. Yi Xian nodded. Yi Xian did not care about the death of a divine class mount. After all, these divine class mounts could be revived when the time was right. Therefore, Yi Xian had nothing to worry about. He watched as the four-eared divine tiger wreaked havoc among the divine class mounts. To be honest, Yi Xian also wanted to have such a prediction ability. His talent was simply invincible. He could predict any attack in advance. Yi Xian believed that he could do the same in the future. But now was not the time to think about it. 1,000 beast sword servants, lure that guy here. Yi Xian ordered the 1,000 beast sword servants. By now, he had finished setting up the talisman seal. But could the four-eared divine tiger enter so easily? Yi Xian was not sure. After all, this guy had the ability to predict. And he was not stupid. He probably already knew what Yi Xian was up to. Sure enough, just as Yi Xian had expected, this fellow wasn't that easy to hook up with. He even looked at Yi Xian mockingly. It looked like he was mocking Yi Xian. F***CK. I'm being mocked by a divine beast. Yi Xian was speechless. He did not expect this to happen. No matter how the 1,000 beast sword servants, divine rank mounts, and the 100 flowers flower goddess tried to tempt that guy, he refused to take the bait. Damn it, he couldn't play around like this. If he played around like this, wouldn't Yi Xian's restriction be completely meaningless? No, he had to think of a way. Flower god sword servants, take your 100 flower god and retreat into the restriction. Yi Xian gave the order. In the blink of an eye, the 100 flower deities all retreated into the formation. Why did Yi Xian withdraw the 100 flowers flower god into the array? This was because the flower god of 100 flowers was proficient in long-range attacks. In the current situation, long-range attacks were more effective against Yi Xian. 100 flower god. Attack. God tier mounts, defend the area. Yi Xian gave the order, and one by one, the flower gods unleashed their long-range attacks. Beams of light shot towards the four-eared divine tiger. Although it was not able to harm the four-eared divine tiger, it was still very annoying. Human, are you trying to test the limits of my patience? The four-eared divine tiger spoke to Yi Xian for the second time. This time, Yi Xian would not ignore him. Humph, you're just a beast. You're asking for it. Yi Xian said calmly. His tone was filled with disdain for the four-eared divine tiger. QWPM. Of course, this did not mean that Yi Xian was underestimating the four-eared divine tiger. Since Yi Xian had already set up a restriction to deal with the four-eared divine tiger, it was clear that Yi Xian valued him highly. However, this fella did not fall for the bait. Therefore, Yi Xian could only think of ways to provoke him. Only by provoking him would he be able to lure him into the talisman restriction. Even if it was a talisman restriction, as long as it was a restriction, there would be a limit. That was, it could not be moved. In other words, Yi Xian had miscalculated this time. He did not expect the four-eared divine tiger to be so difficult to deal with. Haha, human, do you think that you can lure me into your trap like this? It's up to you whether you take the bait or not. However, I will slowly wear you down. Yi Xian said calmly. Even if Yi Xian was helpless against the four-eared divine tiger, he would not admit it. Soon, Yi Xian's god-tier mounts were all destroyed by the special domain of Mountain Hill. Even the 1,000 beast sword servants were killed. However, Yi Xian did not care. He ordered the flower gods to continue harassing the four-eared divine tiger. When the cooldown was over, Yi Xian would summon the 1,000 beast sword servants and god-tier mounts to attack again. Just like that, in 10 days, Yi Xian attacked 10 times. Although each time, it was to no avail. However, The four-eared divine tiger could not take it anymore. On the 11th day. Damned human. Since you want to die, I will grant you your wish. Do you think that you can do anything to me just because you set up a seal? Today, I will tear you apart and turn your heart into a snack. No matter how cautious the four-eared divine tiger was, he could not take Xianxia's attacks anymore. Again and again, wave after wave. Even if the god-tier mounts were killed, they would appear again after a while. At this moment, the four-eared divine tiger's heart was probably treating Xian like that annoying fly that couldn't be chased away, yet it kept on tossing and turning at the side. He finally decided to enter the seal and kill Xian. After all, in his eyes, Xian was as weak as an ant. Killing Xian was a piece of cake. However, the seal around Xian was a little strange. He did not dare to make a move recklessly. The four-eared divine tiger, who had the ability to predict, could clearly sense the threat from the seal. However, his eyes told him that the seal was not much of a threat. One was his eyes, the other was his intuition. Both of them were his own feelings, so he could only rely on his own thoughts to judge. The four-eared divine tiger did not dare to come over because his intuition told him that the seal was very strange. However, Xian's constant harassment had finally annoyed the four-eared divine tiger. All I need is a split second. A split second is all I need to kill this human before me. That's right. It was only for a split second. Even if that restriction was a threat, it couldn't possibly pose a threat to me in a split second. As long as I am fast enough, I can leave quickly after killing that human. The four-eared divine tiger kept encouraging himself. He was also trying to find a suitable reason to attack Xian. In the end, impulse won over reason. The four-eared divine tiger attacked. Roar! The four-eared divine tiger turned into a ray of light. Relying on his powerful ability to predict, he broke through the god-tier mount's defensive line. Although Xian had intentionally left the defensive line loose, he was afraid that even if he upgraded his mount, it would not be able to stop this guy. Chapter 2299. Boom! As if breaking through a barrier, the four-eared divine tiger finally charged into the falling leaves talisman. 135-7924 6810 GGGGGD. In an instant, a gust of wind blew. Within the area of the seal, a gust of wind blew. And this gust of wind was brought about by the four-eared divine tiger. The faster he moved, the stronger the gust of wind was. But that was not the key. The key was the leaves mixed in with the gust of wind. It turned out that the ancient tree was constantly dropping leaves. At this moment, the entire ground was covered with withered leaves. And these leaves were the trump card of the falling leaves talisman. Xian stood on top of the ancient tree, the corners of his lips curling upwards. Today, after entering the falling leaves talisman, the four-eared divine tiger was at the mercy of Xian. Seal the seal formation door. Following Xian's command, the edges of the seal formed a defensive barrier made of withered leaves and strong winds. And it was not just one barrier, but six. 6 irregular strands of troposphere directly locked down the entire fallen leaf restriction talisman. Xian looked at the four-eared divine tiger calmly. Today, Xian wanted to see what else he could do in his talisman seal. The four-eared divine tiger was panicking. He suddenly realized that his prediction ability was not enough. Yes, he could still make a prediction. But how could he do that with so many withered leaves? Even if he moved, he could only activate the leaves in front of him to attack him. And then there were the leaves that attacked him on their own accord. In other words, at any moment, there would be tens of thousands of leaves attacking him. And these leaves were constantly changing. Even if the four-eared divine tiger had the ability to predict, how could he lock onto so many leaves to attack? Perhaps the leaves in the falling leaves talisman seal were not very strong individually. But this talisman seal did not rely on individual attacks to achieve victory. Poof poof poof. Boom boom boom. A series of explosions rang out incessantly. The four-eared divine tiger was under attack at every moment. The strong winds made it impossible for the four-eared divine tiger to move quickly. Even though he was a divine sovereign, he could only slow down in front of the wind created by the falling leaves divine talisman. His body was even riddled with wounds. Because of the loyalty of the restrictions, the ancient tree continued to drop leaves. The leaves danced in the wind and continued to attack the four-eared divine tiger. The four-eared god tiger was already regretting it not long after he had entered. But now, He couldn't leave even if he wanted to. This was because no matter which direction he moved in, the gale would immediately change direction. This was the falling leaves god talisman restriction. The laws of wind were completely ineffective. In the blink of an eye, the gale could change direction completely. The four-eared divine tiger could do nothing to it. The four ears divine talisman's divine power shield continued to weaken until it finally shattered. After that, his body was continuously attacked by countless withered leaves. Even if it was just a small wound, as long as the speed of the wound was faster than the recovery speed of the four-eared divine tiger, the only thing that awaited the four-eared divine tiger was death. The small wounds continued to expand. Although the four-eared divine tiger had gone crazy, it was a pity that his madness was in vain. In front of the strong falling leaves divine talisman restriction, the four-eared divine tiger was exhausted to death. Finally, the four-eared divine tiger fell. His body was already a bloody mess. His divine power was also completely depleted. Such a death was undoubtedly a form of torture. Xianxia waved his hand and activated his devouring ability. The body of the four-eared divine tiger was instantly devoured by Xianxia. Ding! Host has broken through. Current state is upper grade 5 true god. Ding! System notification. Host has killed four-eared divine tiger. Obtained 1 drop of golden blood. Ding! System notification. Host has killed four-eared divine tiger. Obtained fragment of law of prediction. What? Fragment of law of prediction? Xianxia was overjoyed. One should know that the power of prediction was extremely strong. Who would have thought that it could be classified as a type of law? Initially, Xianxia thought that the four-eared divine tiger would drop his law of the mountain hill. Who would have thought that it would be a fragment of law of prediction? Awesome! This was even better than leveling up. However, when Xianxia saw the number of fragments required for the law of prediction, he felt a little depressed. The reason for that was because the law of prediction actually required 200 fragments. 200 fragments were not something that could be obtained just because one wanted to. One should know that Xianxia had killed 2 divine beasts here. One of them was a mid-level divine lord, while the other was a low-level divine lord. However, each of them only gave him 1 fragment of law of prediction. In that case, Xianxia would have to kill 200 divine beasts here to get the law of prediction. The key was that he needed 200 divine beasts that all had law of prediction fragments. Divine beasts with law of prediction were not easy to find. This four-eared divine tiger was only here to fill the position of the fire frost lion that Xianxia had killed last time. As for the other divine beasts, there wasn't a single one that was similar to this four-eared divine tiger. Of course, no matter what, Xianxia had a glimmer of hope. Therefore, Xianxia did not mind. Upper grade 5 true god realm? He was only 5 levels away from the divine lord level. In other words, he only needed to kill 2 more divine beasts here. When that time came, Xianxia would be able to enter the overgod level. QWPM, he would become a divine lord level overgod. This could be said to be a qualitative leap. Overgod, a god that ruled over a region. In the Kunlun divine domain, other than those small forces or those in the border regions, the true core forces of the Kunlun divine domain, such as the sect masters and clan leaders, were all master gods, regardless of whether they were gods, divine lords, or other realms. System, send me back to the Kunlun territory. Xianxia actually didn't waste much time here. In total, it had only been 2 months. 2 months was like the blink of an eye in the realm of the gods. At first, Xianxia thought that nothing would change after he returned. However, when he returned this time, he heard something different. Have you heard? There's a place called the Maple Territory at the border of the Kunlun Divine Territory. It's very small, with only a few dozen territories in front of it. However, it was swept up by a force in a short period of time. 2/3 of the people in the Maple Territory were killed. That's terrifying. What's so scary about that? Isn't it normal for something like that to happen in such a small and remote place? They don't have any experts there. I'm guessing that they must have offended someone. The Maple Territory was massacred. Xianxia was shocked and furious at the same time. Chapter 2300. Translator. Endless Fantasy Translation Editor. Endless Fantasy Translation Annihilation, that damnable annihilation organization. Apart from them, there was no one else. 135-7924? 6810 GGGGGD. Previously, Yi Xian had led Plum Valley Manor to deal a heavy blow to that mysterious organization. Originally, Yi Xian had thought that the mysterious organization had already left. Even if they were to take revenge on the Maple region, they would not be too strong. But who would have thought that Annihilation had actually massacred 2/3 of the people of the Maple region? That was in front of a few dozen realms. At the very least, there were tens of millions of people. So many people. Those who had fought against Annihilation were only a portion of them. Many of the others were actually innocent at all. Damn it! Damn it! Yi Xian could not care less. He immediately requested to use the teleportation array and rushed toward the Maple region. His first goal was naturally to check out Plum Valley Manor. That was because Yi Xian knew that Plum Valley Manor would most likely become the first target of the mysterious organization. By the time Yi Xian rushed over, sure enough, the Plum Valley Villa had already disappeared. Those who believed in Yi Xian had also been massacred. This was something Yi Xian could not accept. Yi Xian quickly searched through the wreckage of Plum Valley Manor. He hoped to find 1 or 2 survivors and understand what had happened. Fortunately, Yi Xian found them. A total of 5 people. 2 had their hands and feet cut off, and 3 had lost their eyes. Furthermore, their godheads had already been destroyed, so they were nothing more than cripples waiting to die. These 5 people were deliberately left behind by the mysterious organization. Good, very good, very good. Annihilation, I, Yi Xian, will not live under the same sky as you. Yi Xian was infuriated. Most of the people of Plum Valley Manor had already believed in Yi Xian, treating Yi Xian as their protector. They had even continuously proclaimed how powerful Yi Xian was to the outside world. But now, the entire manor was left with only 5 useless people. QWPM system, heal them. Yi Xian's hands glowed faintly. This was the healing ability he had obtained from the Divine Blossom Sword Servants. Yi Xian wanted to treat the 5 of them. After all, if Yi Xian did not care about them, only death would await them. Lord Emissary, don't waste your energy. It's useless. We were crippled by the ancient Yao God and have long lost all of our aptitude and foundation. There's no way to repair it. One of them shouted at Yi Xian. He had lost both his arms and legs. Usually, he could only rely on another person who had lost his eyes to carry him around. When Yi Xian had arrived, they hadn't been able to sense him due to their lack of spiritual force. However, he had been able to see him because he had eyes. What did you say? An ancient demon god? That's right, Lord Emissary. It's better if you don't care about us. You should quickly report to the god domain. The ancient demon god has reappeared. I'm afraid there will be a great calamity. These guys are collecting totem beasts to revive the ancient demon god. This time, they've massacred so many of our people in order to hold the blood sacrifice of the monster god. Damn it! Yi Xian suddenly punched out, but stopped mid-air. Yi Xian knew that the 5 people in front of him, who had lost their divine spark, were very weak. It could be said that even if Yi Xian's aura changed slightly, he could still shock them to death. All right, I know what to do. I'll send you to a place now. There, I might have a way to heal you. Don't resist. I'll send you there now. Yi Xian was, of course, referring to the devouring space. In the devouring space, Yi Xian was confident that he could heal them. Even if he couldn't, he could protect their souls from being destroyed. After all, these 5 people were the last 5 people left in Plum Valley Mountain Manor. After putting the 5 people into the devouring space, Yi Xian couldn't calm his anger for a long time. It had to be said that Mo Bai Jing was lucky, because they had also had an ancient Yao god resurrected. However, the Annihilation organization had taken the ancient Yao god and left without taking revenge on Mo Bai Jing. Otherwise, the current situation in Mo Bai Jing would be a reflection of the current situation in Maple. After all, there were still people in Mo Bai Jing that Yi Xian cared about. The people of the 5th Hall, Mo Shang's training camp, Ling Xian Court and so on. In Yi Xian's heart, these people were the people he had to protect. This won't do. Looks like I have to think of a way to return to Mo Bai Jing. I can only rest assured if I leave behind enough backup plans. Of course, although that was what Yi Xian thought, he couldn't do anything about it. The distance of 3 million realms was no joke. Plus, there were countless obstacles along the way, as well as countless chief god domains. If Yi Xian wanted to go over, at least given his current strength, he wouldn't be able to get there quickly. Therefore, Yi Xian could only put this idea aside for the time being. And now, the most important thing for Yi Xian was to find the hiding place of the Annihilation Organization, then exterminate them and avenge the people of Maple. However, after gathering information for several days, Yi Xian realized that he couldn't get the information he wanted here at all. Since that was the case, Yi Xian couldn't afford to waste any more time here. Yi Xian gathered the people and built a new city in Maple. Yi Xian named it Maple City, and more than half of the survivors moved here. Yi Xian also spent a large portion of his resources to set up several permanent defense seals here. It could be said that anyone below mid-level Divine Lord could forget about breaking into Maple City. The people were very fond of Yi Xian, and Yi Xian gained a large amount of faith points. But Yi Xian didn't care about that. What he cared about was how to find the people of the Annihilation Organization and avenge the people of Maple. At the same time, he wanted to prevent the Annihilation Organization from continuing to harm the Kunlun Divine Domain. Although Yi Xian didn't know what the people of the Annihilation Organization wanted to do with this demon god blood sacrifice. But Yi Xian knew in his heart that it couldn't be anything good. In the Kunlun Divine Domain, there were also organizations that made a living by providing information. Of course, such organizations were usually hidden in special places. This time, the city that Yi Xian was going to was the core of the entire Kunlun Divine Domain. It was where Mi Fu lived. Under normal circumstances, people like to call it the Divine Master's Palace, because everything there was to serve the Divine Master, Mi Fu. But the Divine Master's Palace was also where the headquarters of various forces in the Kunlun Divine Domain were located. After all, where in the entire Kunlun Divine Domain could be safer than the Divine Master's residence? Yi Xian had actually been here once before. But that time, he was brought here directly. So, Yi Xian didn't have the chance to see what this city looked like. But this time, Yi Xian was going there of his own accord. Naturally, he would see many things that he hadn't seen before. The moment Yi Xian arrived, his first reaction was that it was powerful.